Welcome, dear listener. You have found your way here tonight to rest, to drift, to escape the weight of the day. So I invite you now to close your eyes, to breathe slowly, to let your shoulders soften. Let the rhythm of these words carry you, not into worry, not into thought, but into calm. Tonight we are going to explore something strange, something curious, something both absurd and fascinating. We will wander back 1,000 years into the Middle Ages and look at how people, in their own ways, got wasted, how they drank, how they stumbled, how they chased visions through herbs, through wine, through wildness. Yes, tonight we explore what we might call, with a smile, the medieval ckHeads. And before we begin, if this gentle journey pleases you, if you find calm in these wandering words, please remember to like this video, to subscribe, and even to let it play softly in the background as you drift, or as you work, or as you dream. Small gestures, but they help me continue creating these quiet voyages into forgotten worlds. Now, let us drift back. Imagine a medieval tavern, smoke thick in the air, straw scattered on the floor, wooden mugs sloshing with ale. People gather, faces flushed, voices raised, laughter breaking into songs that stumble and slurs. Alcohol was everywhere in the Middle Ages. Water was often unsafe, carrying sickness and filth, so beer and wine became daily drink. Even children drank weak ale, called small beer, a safe substitute. But for adults, ale grew stronger, wine grew heavier, and the evenings stretched into hate. Men stumbled into streets, women sang loudly, arguments flared and softened again in drunken embraces. Close your eyes and picture this scene. The tavern candlelight flickers on rough beams. The air smells of sweat and drink, the floor sticky with spilled ale. A man leans against a table, his speech barely forming words, his body swaying like a boat on waves. Another bangs a mug in rhythm, singing a tune that no longer carries melody. These were the medieval drunkards, the fools of the village, the men who spent wages too quickly and returned home staggering. Everyone knew them, everyone pitied them, and yet everyone joined them too. For drink was part of life, part of surviving, part of forgetting the weight of hunger and work. But drunkenness was not the only escape. Nature offered other paths. Herbs grew in fields and forests, some harmless, some strange, some powerful enough to twist the mind into visions. Monks studied them, healers brewed them, and wanderers sometimes used them carelessly. Mandrake, with its strange human-shaped roots, was said to cause wild visions if eaten. Henbane, with its bitter taste, could bring sleep, hallucination, or madness. Even mushrooms found in damp corners of fields could cause laughter, strange dreams, or trembling. People did not call them drugs, but they knew their effects, and whispers spread of those who used them not for healing, but for escape. Imagine now a figure crouched by a fire, chewing bitter leaves, eyes wide as shadows flicker on the walls. They laugh suddenly at nothing, then weep, then speak to shapes only they can see. To villagers, this was possession, madness, perhaps witchcraft. But to us, it looks very much like intoxication, the medieval equivalent of a mind reaching beyond its limits. These people became outcasts, feared, avoided, yet also secretly fascinating. They were living proof that reality could bend, that visions could be seen, that another world lay just beyond the veil. And then there were the unfortunates touched by sickness. Ergot, a fungus that grew on rye, poisoned whole villages at times. Bread made from tainted grain brought convulsions, burning sensations, and hallucinations like fire running through the veins. People stumbled, screamed, shook as though demons gripped them. Whole towns thought themselves cursed, struck by witchcraft or punished by God. In truth, it was food turned toxic, a natural poison mistaken for sin. Those afflicted were often cast out, left to writhe in fields, their bodies contorted, their minds lost in visions. To others, they were damned, possessed. To us, they were victims of a cruel accident, but still, they became the medieval crackheads of their day, unsteady, shaking, speaking to shadows. Breathe slowly now, and let yourself drift deeper into this strange world. A world where ale blurred minds each night, where herbs whispered strange visions, where poisoned bread turned whole villages into fevered dreamers. A world where madness and intoxication mingled, where outcasts stumbled at the edges of society, half feared, half pitied, half laughed at. They were not called addicts, not called crackheads, but their presence was the same. They were reminders of how fragile the mind was, how easily it could be led astray by drink, by herb, by sickness, by despair. In the Middle Ages, drunkenness was more than an accident. It was often expected, part of the rhythm of festivals and feasts, woven into the way people celebrated life's brief joys. Ale flowed, wine poured, mugs clinked, and the night grew louder, messier, stranger. In these moments, whole villages slipped into haze, turning ordinary men and women into stumbling shadows of themselves. Imagine the scene of a medieval feast. Long wooden tables stretch across a hall, candles dripping wax onto stone floors, the air thick with smoke and laughter. Roasted meats fill the air with heavy scent. Bread is torn and passed from hand to hand. Jugs of ale slosh as they are tipped again and again into mugs. At first, the mood is bright. Songs carrying strong voices, laughter ringing warm. But as the night deepens, as mugs empty and fill once more, the edges blur. Voices grow louder, less steady. Words slur. Arguments rise like sparks from the fire. Someone stumbles, another spills drink, another leans too far across the table and collapses into sleep. Close your eyes and picture the hall in its later hours. The songs now falter, tuneless but insistent. The laughter has turned to shouts. The clatter of mugs now mingled with the crash of plates. A man leaps onto a table, swaying, shouting verses that no one can follow. The crowd cheers, though no one knows why. Others stagger out into the night, their feet unsteady on cobblestones, their minds swimming. These were not rare moments, but common ones. Festivals were times of release, when life's heavy burdens were drowned in ale. when order gave way briefly to chaos. But chaos had its costs. Fights broke out, sometimes with fists, sometimes with knives. A drunken quarrel could turn into a lifelong feud, or end in sudden blood. The law was not blind to this. Drunkenness was often fined, punished, frowned upon, though it was also tolerated because it was so common. Priests preached against it, calling it sin, a path to ruin, a way for the devil to slip into men's hearts. And yet, even those same priests often drank heavily themselves, their warnings softened by their own indulgence. The festivals of drink were not only in halls, but in the streets, carnivals, fairs, holy days. Each became an excuse for excess. Villagers danced in muddy squares, ale spilling from mugs, songs rising high and falling low. Masks were worn, costumes donned, roles reversed. A beggar might act as lord, a farmer as priest, a fool as king. Drink blurred the lines, made the impossible feel possible, turned the world upside down for a night. And in that upside-down world, men and women stumbled, laughed, fell, rose again, their minds swimming in haze. Imagine yourself walking through such a festival. Torches light the night, their smoke curling into the dark. Music plays, uneven, broken, yet full of energy. Around you, bodies sway, arms wave, mugs clink. A woman shouts with laughter, spilling ale on her dress. A man collapses in the mud, too drunk to rise, his friends pulling him up only to fall themselves. The air is thick with the smell of drink, of sweat, of roasted meat, of earth churned beneath stomping feet. Everywhere is noise, confusion, chaos, yet also a strange joy, a release from daily hardship. These were the medieval drunkards, the fools of feast days, the ones who woke with aching heads and empty purses, who bore bruises from fights they could not remember. They were not rare, not few, but many, for drink was woven into life as surely as bread. It dulled hunger, softened grief, filled long nights with laughter that blurred into forgetfulness. Breathe slowly, and let yourself imagine the strange duality of it. On one hand, drink brought laughter, warmth, companionship, escape. On the other, it brought fights, shame, poverty, and ruin. Society both embraced and condemned it, both relied on it and feared it. And so, in every tavern, every hall, every festival, the medieval ckHeads appeared. Men and women stumbling through haze, half celebrated, half scorned, always present, always remembered in whispers and laughter the next day. The Middle Ages lived in constant tension between indulgence and restraint. Nowhere was this more visible than in the way society judged drunkenness. On the one hand, ale and wine were part of daily life, safer to drink than much of the water, present at meals from dawn to dusk. On the other, intoxication was condemned as sin, as weakness, as a path that led not only to shame but to damnation. To be drunk was both ordinary and dangerous, tolerated and punished, forgiven and judged. Imagine the voice of a priest in a village church. His words echo beneath the wooden beams. His tone sharp as he warns the congregation that drunkenness is the devil's door, the way temptation enters, the way souls are lost. He quotes scripture. He gestures fiercely, his face red with urgency. The villagers nod, some in shame, some in defiance, some with the secret memory of last night's ale still heavy in their heads. They know the warning, but they also know the taste of drink, the warmth it brings, the way it carries them through cold winters and long days. Close your eyes and picture the contradiction. The priest who warns may himself stumble from wine after Mass, his voice slurred in private, his steps unsteady. Lords who punished drunken peasants often feasted to excess, their halls echoing with laughter and spilling drink. The sin was not in drinking, but in losing control, or in drinking beyond one's station. For peasants, drunkenness was shame. For lords, it was indulgence. For monks, it was both temptation and escape, carried in the very wine they blessed. Villagers, too, held mixed views. A man who drank too much was mocked as fool, his staggering remembered in laughter, his mistakes retold around fires. Yet he was also pitied, forgiven, seen as weak but human. Everyone knew the lure of ale, the relief it brought after endless toil. To condemn completely was to condemn themselves, for all drank, all stumbled, all felt the haze at some point. Some, however, were marked more harshly. The repeat drunkards, those who spent wages in taverns, who neglected families, who returned home angry and violent. These men bore heavier judgment. They became cautionary tales, examples for children, warnings whispered by mothers. Do not grow to be like him. Their lives unraveled in drink, and society labeled them with scorn. Yet even then, they remained part of the village, both mocked and tolerated, never fully cast out, for their weakness was too familiar to deny. The law took notice too. In many towns, fines were imposed for disorder caused by drink. A man caught fighting while drunk might pay coin he could not spare. A woman shouting in streets might be dragged before a magistrate. Repeat offenders risked harsher penalties, time in the stocks, lashes, or expulsion from taverns. Yet the punishments rarely ended the cycle. Drink returned, and with it the same faces, the same scenes, the same haze. Imagine the stocks in a village square. A man sits, his head and hands locked in wood, his face flushed with shame, or perhaps still heavy with ale. Children throw scraps, villagers jeer, some shake their heads in pity. This, too, was part of the ritual of drunkenness, the public humiliation that reminded all of the line between celebration and sin. Yet by the next feast day, the same man might be seen again, mug in hand, laughing too loudly, falling once more into the same rhythm. Breathe slowly and let yourself sink into this contradiction. Drunkenness in the Middle Ages was both condemned and embraced. It was a sin that priests thundered against, yet also a daily necessity. It was mocked in jest, punished by law, yet tolerated as part of life. To be drunk, then, was to live in this in-between, half fool, half sinner, half human, half warning. The medieval crackheads, stumbled not only in taverns and streets, but in the very space between survival and sin. A space everyone understood, because everyone, at one time or another, stepped into it themselves. If peasants drank to escape hunger, and nobles drank to celebrate power, soldiers drank to survive the weight of war. In the Middle Ages, armies marched not only on foot and on horse, but on ale, on wine, on mead. Drink was constant. Before battles to numb fear, after battles to silence memory, during long marches to keep men moving. Soldiers and mercenaries lived with death always near, and the haze was both shield and companion, softening the edges of a life built on violence. Imagine a camp before battle. The tents stretch across a muddy field. Fires flicker. Weapons lie stacked against stakes. Men gather round barrels of ale, their voices low, their hands unsteady. Some sharpen blades, their eyes unfocused. Others sing loudly, their mugs spilling, their words defiant against fear. The captains shout orders, but the haze grows thicker, the drink flowing too easily, the courage it brings to heavy. For many, the ale is armor as real as steel, a warmth against the cold terror of dawn. Close your eyes and picture the aftermath. The battle is done, the field heavy with silence, broken only by groans, by crows, by the sound of wind. Survivors gather again around the barrels, their hands shaking, their faces pale. They drink not in joy but in need, drowning images too sharp to carry sober. The taste of blood lingers with the taste of wine, the haze carrying them into sleep, into forgetfulness, into dreams that are no gentler than the day itself. Mercenaries were known for their indulgence. They fought for coin, not for loyalty, and their camps were filled with drink, with gambling, with laughter that covered sorrow. Villagers feared them as much for their drunkenness as for their swords. They raided taverns, seized barrels, left fields, trampled, and markets empty. To hire them was to invite both protection and chaos, for their haze could turn quickly to violence, their laughter to cruelty. They were soldiers, but they were also medieval crackheads in armor, stumbling through war as much as taverns. Imagine marching with them. The road stretches long, the sun heavy, the men singing loudly, their voices slurred. Barrels roll on wagons, guarded as closely as weapons. At night, the fires blaze, the dice clatter, the drink flows, quarrels flare, fists fly, knives flash, then laughter returns, the cycle endless. For them, war and drink were bound together, inseparable, each feeding the other, each shaping lives already scarred by violence. The Church condemned this too, warning that drunken soldiers endangered not only their souls but their armies. Priests traveled with camps, offering confession, offering mass, offering warnings. Some soldiers listened, kneeling in tears before returning to their mugs. Others laughed, their faith buried beneath the haze. Even in war, the contradiction remained. Devotion by day, indulgence by night, fear silenced by drink more than prayer. Imagine the silence of a soldier alone after such a night. He sits by a dying fire, his mug empty, his head heavy. His sword lies beside him, his armor dented, his hands trembling. He remembers faces lost, cries heard, his own voice shouting in haze. He knows tomorrow will bring more, and the mug will return, filled again, his shield against the weight of memory. For him, drink is not only indulgence, but necessity, the thread that holds him together when all else has frayed. The haze followed soldiers everywhere, into sieges where weeks of hunger and fear were drowned in stolen wines, into marches where barrels were rationed as carefully as bread, into victories where celebration blurred into destruction, villages burned by hands too drunk to hold back. War itself seemed intoxicated, its rhythm shaped by drink, its cruelty sharpened by haze. Breathe slowly and let yourself drift into this world. Fires flicker, barrels roll, mugs lift, voices slur. The soldiers of the Middle Ages marched through haze as surely as through mud and blood. Their lives were bound to drink, their memories drowned in it, their courage born of it. They were warriors, but also medieval crackheads, stumbling through war as they stumbled through taverns, their haze inseparable from their swords. The battlefield did not always end with silence. When soldiers survived, when the fighting was over, when the enemy fled or lay still, another kind of chaos began. For medieval armies, victory was followed by looting, by drinking, by wildness that spread through camps and villages alike. The haze of war blended with the haze of drink, until soldiers became as dangerous in victory as they were in battle. The line between celebration and destruction vanished, replaced by noise, by fire, by intoxication. Imagine a captured town at dusk, the gates broken, the streets littered with bodies, the houses still smoldering. Soldiers flood inside, their armor dented, their faces smeared with dirt and blood. They shout, they laugh, they sing in voices cracked with exhaustion and drink. Barrels are dragged from cellars, mugs filled and spilled across cobblestones. Men stagger through houses, grabbing what they can. Bread, coins, jewels, clothes. Some stumble into churches, drinking wine meant for holy rites, their laughter echoing against stone walls. To the villagers who survive, the soldiers are not saviors, but tormentors, their haze more terrifying than the battle itself. Close your eyes and picture the fires that follow. A soldier drops a torch into straw, his hand too careless, his mind too clouded. Flames rise, catching beams, leaping across roofs. Others cheer, their mugs lifted, their eyes shining with the glow. The air grows thick with smoke, with screams, with the crackle of fire. Yet still they drink, stumbling, shouting, their joy tangled with ruin. The town is undone not only by war, but by the haze that rules its victors. Mercenaries were feared most of all. They fought for coin, not loyalty, and their plunder was ruthless. When paid, they drank. When unpaid, they drank more, turning their rage against those who had hired them. Their camps spilled into villages, their laughter loud, their fists quick. They looted, they gambled, they fought one another, their haze unchecked by law or prayer. To hire them was to invite ruin as much as protection, for the haze was as much part of their swords as steel. Imagine a camp after such a victory. Fires blaze, barrels are emptying, dice clatter across wooden boards. A minstrel sings, his song drowned by shouting. A fight breaks out, two men wrestling, knives flashing, others cheering. A woman weeps, her voice lost in the noise. Dogs bark, children cry, the night alive with chaos. The soldiers are drunk, not only on ale, but on victory, on violence, on freedom from restraint. The world beyond the camp is silent, but inside it, the haze grows thicker, louder, heavier. The church condemned this, calling looting and drunkenness sins of pride and cruelty. Priests tried to stop it, lifting crosses, shouting sermons, begging soldiers to restrain themselves. Sometimes they were ignored, mocked, even struck. Other times, soldiers listened for a moment, only to return to their mugs by nightfall. Faith was fragile against the weight of victory and drink. The haze drowned even holy voices, leaving only laughter, shouting, ruin. Villagers told stories of such nights for generations. They remembered soldiers stumbling through streets, torches in hand, mugs spilling. They remembered songs shouted in the dark, doors broken, lives overturned. The soldiers were not remembered as heroes, but as drunken shadows, their faces blurred, their names forgotten, their haze burned into memory. To live in the path of armies was to live in fear of both defeat and victory, for both carried the same ruin when haze ruled men. And yet, the soldiers themselves saw it differently. To them, the drink was relief, their joy earned, their plunder deserved. They did not see terror in their laughter, only survival, only escape from death too near. They lived each night as if it were their last, for in truth it might have been. The haze was their answer to war's weight, even if it made them monsters in the eyes of those who watched. Breathe slowly, and let yourself drift into this image. Fires burning, mugs spilling, voices shouting, dice clattering. The soldiers stumble, laugh, sing, fight. Their haze as much part of victory as swords or banners. To be in their path was to feel fear, to feel ruin, to feel the strange, terrible joy of men who drowned war in drink. The medieval crackheads of battlefields were not only fighters, but revelers, their haze spreading destruction as surely as their blades. By the noise of battle and the chaos of looting. There was another side to the soldier's life, one quieter, heavier, harder to see. Not every mug was lifted in celebration. Not every song was shouted in victory. Many were lifted alone, in silence, by men haunted by what they had seen, by what they had done, by what they had lost. For soldiers, drink was not only about joy. It was about forgetting, about numbing, about surviving memories, too sharp to carry awake. Imagine a soldier sitting by a dying fire at night. The camp is quiet now. The songs faded, the laughter gone. His companions sleep around him, their bodies sprawled in cloaks and armor. He holds a mug in his hands, his eyes fixed on the flames. His face is hollow, his voice silent. He drinks slowly, not to laugh, not to cheer, but to blur the visions that rise when he closes his eyes. The faces of the dead, the cries of the wounded, the smell of blood in the grass. Each sip is a shield, fragile, temporary, but all he has. Close your eyes and picture another soldier, alone in a corner of the camp. He sharpens his sword, though it does not need sharpening. His hands tremble slightly, his breath uneven. Beside him sits a jug, half empty, the liquid dark. He pauses to drink, then returns to the blade, his eyes distant, his mind elsewhere. The drink steadies him, though it does not heal him. He cannot speak of what he has seen, cannot confess it, cannot erase it, but he can drink, and so he does, night after night, carrying his sorrow in silence. Many soldiers drank for courage before battle, but more drank for silence after. They carried memories that never left them, that followed them across fields, across roads, across years. Drink softened the edges, dulled the pain, made sleep possible. Without it, the nights stretched too long, the thoughts too sharp. With it, the nights blurred, the memories softened, even if only for a little while. The haze was not indulgence, but survival, fragile and fleeting. Imagine a soldier returning home after years of war. His village welcomes him, the bells ring, his family embraces him. But as night falls, he sits alone, a jug beside him. His eyes are distant, his smile thin. He drinks quietly, while others sleep, his body still remembering the weight of armor, his mind still hearing the cries of battle. He is home, but the haze remains, carried with him like a shadow. To his family, he is changed, distant, unreachable. To him, drink is the only bridge between past and present, between silence and sleep. The church urged confession, urged prayer, urged men to lay their burdens before God. Some did, kneeling in chapels, tears falling, their voices soft. Others could not, their memories too heavy, their guilt too sharp. For them, prayer was not enough. Drink was easier, quicker, quieter. The priests condemned it, but they did not carry the same weight. They could not see what soldiers saw. And so the soldiers turned not to altars, but to mugs, their haze, their only absolution. Even in victory, the sorrow lingered. Soldiers might laugh in camps, sing loudly in taverns, boast of battles won. But in the quiet moments, when the noise faded, the truth returned. They had killed, they had lost, they had seen too much. The haze could not erase it, but it could soften it, at least for a night, at least until dawn. And so they drank, alone or together, not only as warriors, but as men broken by the weight of their own lives. Breathe slowly, and let yourself drift into this silence. The fire burns low, the mug is heavy, the soldier sits alone. His eyes are distant, his hands unsteady, his thoughts too sharp. He drinks, not for joy, not for laughter, but for survival, for one night of rest in a life filled with war. The medieval crackheads of the battlefield were not only noisy revelers, but also silent figures, haunted and heavy, their haze a fragile shield against the memories they could never lay down. The Middle Ages knew drunkenness well, and with it came the endless search for cures. People wanted relief not only from the haze of night, but from the heavy mornings that followed. Physicians, apothecaries, priests, and old women with herbs all offered remedies, each stranger than the last. Some promised to clear the head, others to steady the stomach, others to drive out the very spirit of intoxication. Most did little more than provide hope, but hope was enough, for the haze was heavy, and people longed for escape. Imagine a physician's chamber, its shelves filled with jars of powders, bundles of dried herbs, vials of dark liquids. A man stumbles in, his face pale, his voice groaning, his head pounding. The physician listens gravely, then prepares a mixture. Ground rosemary, mint steeped in wine, vinegar mixed with honey. The man drinks, grimacing at the bitter taste. The physician assures him the cure will work, though in truth, time is the only healer. Still, the ritual comforts, the hope soothes, the act itself a kind of medicine. Close your eyes and picture another remedy, simpler, more brutal. Some swore by plunging the head into cold water, shocking the body into alertness. Others wrapped the stomach in damp cloths, believing the haze could be drawn out through the skin. Some ate raw cabbage, garlic, or onions, chewing slowly, their mouths filled with bitterness. Others drank strange concoctions, owl eggs boiled in wine, powdered gemstones, the ashes of burnt bread mixed with vinegar. Each cure more bizarre than the last, each reflecting a world where science was scarce and imagination filled the gaps. The church offered remedies too, though theirs were spiritual. Priests told drunkards to pray, to confess, to fast. They spoke of sin and weakness, of the body's folly and the soul's need for discipline. For some, these words brought comfort. For others, they brought only guilt, heavy on top of the pain already carried. Prayer might soothe the spirit, but it rarely steadied the stomach or eased the pounding head. And so, even the devout turned quietly to herbs, to broths, to remedies whispered by neighbors when the priest was not near. Imagine a peasant waking after a night in the tavern. His body aches, his mouth dry, his eyes heavy. He drinks water from a wooden cup, then chews bitter herbs given by his wife, then groans as he returns to his bed. She shakes her head, muttering about folly, but still prepares broth, still places a damp cloth on his forehead. The cure is less about herbs than about care, less about science than about love. He drifts into uneasy sleep, comforted not by medicine, but by presence. Wealthier men and women turned to apothecaries, seeking potions in glass jars, powders in folded paper. They paid well for remedies that promised much and delivered little. Some left lighter in purse, but no clearer in head, their sickness unchanged. Others swore by their cures, convinced that what they drank had worked, though it was only time and rest that had done the healing. The apothecaries smiled, their trade steady, their shelves filled again and again with the same strange cures. Some remedies were harsher still. Bloodletting was sometimes prescribed, the idea that the haze could be drained from the body with blood itself. A man sat pale and weak, his arm cut, the red flow slow and steady, his body trembling. The physician nodded, convinced of the cure, while the patient fainted from weakness. Relief came only when sleep finally claimed him. The remedy no more effective than rest itself. Breathe slowly, and let yourself drift into this world of strange cures. The jars of herbs, the cold water, the prayers whispered, the broths simmering, the blood drawn. The people of the Middle Ages sought relief in every corner, in every whisper, in every remedy they could imagine. Few worked, but still they tried, for the haze was heavy, the mornings cruel, the desire for escape strong. The medieval ckHeads of the night became patients by morning. Their laughter turned to groans, their joy to regret, their haze carried into the hands of healers who offered more hope than cure. Medicine in the Middle Ages was not only herbs and broths. It was also charms, rituals, whispers of magic passed down through families and neighbors. When drunkenness weighed heavy, people turned to remedies as strange as they were hopeful, rooted in superstition as much as in knowledge. These folk cures carried the rhythm of belief, the sense that sickness was not only of the body but of spirits, of fate, of unseen hands. To cure a hangover was not only to heal the head, but to drive away the shadow that drink had left behind. Imagine a woman tying herbs in a small pouch, her hands steady, her voice whispering prayers. She slips it beneath her husband's pillow as he sleeps, his face pale, his body restless. She believes the herbs will draw the haze away, carrying it into the earth by morning. He does not know it is there, but when he wakes lighter, she nods knowingly, convinced the charm has worked. Whether it was rest, time, or the pouch, the belief itself carries its own comfort. Close your eyes and picture a man placing an iron key in his mug before drinking water, convinced that the metal will pull the sickness from his body. Others placed knives under their beds, believing steel drove away the spirits of drunkenness. Some burned certain herbs, letting the smoke curl through the room, whispering that the haze would follow it into the air. Others spoke charms over cups, words repeated 3 times, each syllable a promise that the drink's curse would fade. Superstitions varied from place to place. In some villages, people believed an egg cracked into wine before bed would keep the head clear. In others, they swore that touching the ground at dawn, bare hands pressed into the soil, would draw the sickness away. Some carried stones in their pockets, certain that the weight of earth itself would steady them. Others whispered prayers not to saints, but to household spirits, offering bread or milk in exchange for relief. In every corner, belief shaped the cure as much as herbs or broths ever did. Imagine a feast where nobles drank too much, their laughter heavy, their goblets endless. When morning came, their servants brought not only broth but charms, a ring dipped in vinegar, a cloth tied with special knots, a prayer whispered over a basin of water. Nobles scoffed publicly, but many still tried them, their pride hidden behind desperation. For wealth did not protect them from the weight of haze, and even the richest sought hope where they could find it. The church frowned upon many of these remedies, calling them superstition, even sin. Priests warned that charms invited demons, that rituals strayed from holy truth. Yet the same priests sometimes whispered their own blessings over cups of water, their own prayers over herbs, their own mixtures of faith and superstition. The line was blurred, and the people walked it without question. For when the head pounded and the stomach churned, any cure was welcome, no matter how strange. Imagine the hush of a cottage at dawn. A man groans on a straw bed. His wife stirs herbs into a pot, her lips moving in quiet prayer. Beside her, a child watches as she traces a small symbol over the cup before handing it to her husband. He drinks, wincing at the bitterness, but her eyes soften, her voice calm, her belief steady. He sleeps again, and she smiles faintly, certain her charm has worked. The cure is not in the cup, but in the faith behind it. These folk remedies endured because they gave people a sense of control, a way to fight back against weakness. To drink was to surrender to haze. To cure was to reclaim strength, even if only symbolically. The body might still ache, the head might still pound, but the ritual itself gave relief, carried by belief, by tradition, by the comfort of doing something, anything, against the weight of excess. Breathe slowly, and let yourself sink into this world of charms and whispers. The pouch of herbs beneath a pillow, the iron key in a cup, the prayer over smoke, the stone in a pocket. Each cure strange, each cure hopeful, each cure less about science than about faith. The medieval crackheads of the night became believers by morning, turning their weakness into rituals, their haze into stories, their need for relief into traditions that lingered long after the pain was gone. The strange remedies for drunkenness were not only personal cures, they were part of the community, shared, debated, whispered, laughed at, passed from neighbor to neighbor. In the Middle Ages, knowledge did not belong only to books or physicians. It lived in kitchens, in taverns, in markets, carried in the voices of women, of old men, of travelers passing through. Each remedy told a story. Each charm revealed a belief, and together they formed a tapestry of tradition that gave shape to how people understood the haze. Imagine a marketplace on a busy morning, stalls filled with bread, with herbs, with clay pots and baskets. A woman leans close to her neighbor, whispering about the best cure for her husband's heavy head. She speaks of mint boiled in vinegar, of cabbage eaten raw, of a prayer whispered to Saint Bibiana, patron of those who suffered from drink. The neighbor nods, shares her own remedy, swears by it, insists it works better. Around them, others listen, nod, add their own ideas. The remedies shift and change, each voice adding, each memory shaping. The cures becoming more than medicine. They become shared tradition. Close your eyes and picture a tavern the morning after. The laughter of the night has faded, replaced by groans, by quiet muttering, by mugs of water passed instead of ale. Men complain of their heads, their stomachs, their weakness. The tavern keeper shakes his head, smiling faintly, and offers his own remedy, a broth made from bread, garlic, and herbs. He insists it will work, and some believe him, some laugh, some try it anyway. The tavern becomes not only a place of drinking, but of curing. The remedies themselves part of the cycle of haze. Communities judged these remedies in different ways. Some mocked them, calling them foolish, calling them superstition. Men laughed about charms placed under pillows, about stones carried in pockets, about prayers whispered over smoke. Others defended them, insisting that belief itself gave strength, that tradition mattered more than science. For many, it was not about whether the cure worked, but about doing something, about carrying on the same practices as parents and grandparents. The ritual itself gave comfort, binding the community in shared weakness and shared hope. Imagine an old woman in a village, her voice low, her hands steady. People come to her for cures, not only for drunkenness, but for fever, for pain, for sorrow. She ties herbs, she whispers charms, she offers both medicine and comfort. Some call her wise, others call her foolish, a few call her dangerous, yet still they come, because she represents knowledge, tradition, continuity. Her remedies may not heal, but they soothe, and in a world filled with uncertainty, soothing mattered as much as healing. The Church often condemned such practices, warning that superstition was sin, that charms were dangerous, that true healing came only from God. Yet even priests sometimes softened their words, knowing that people needed hope as much as prayer. They too offered blessings over water, herbs over wine, rituals that looked no different from the charms they condemned. The line blurred, and in that blur, communities lived comfortably, mixing holy words with folk traditions, never fully choosing, never fully abandoning either. Imagine a winter evening. Families gathered around hearths. The fire burns low, the air thick with smoke, the voices soft. Someone tells of a cure tried long ago, a charm that worked, a remedy that failed, a story of a man who drank too much and swore he was saved by cabbage boiled in milk. The children laugh. The elders nod. The story passes into memory, into tradition. It is not only cure, but tale, part of the rhythm of life, part of the way people understood themselves. In this way, remedies for drunkenness were never only about the body. They were about the community, about the stories told, about the beliefs shared. They shaped how people saw weakness, how they endured it, how they forgave it. To mock them was to mock tradition. To believe in them was to believe in the community itself. The cures were both foolish and wise, both empty and full, both failure and comfort. Breathe slowly and let yourself drift into this space. The market stalls buzzing with whispered remedies, the tavern filled with broth and laughter, the old woman tying herbs, the priest murmuring blessings, the families around the fire retelling cures as stories. The medieval crackheads of the night became part of this cycle. Their weakness turned into memory, their haze turned into tradition. Their cure less about herbs than about the voices that carried them across generations. Drunkenness in the Middle Ages was not confined to one group, not bound to one place. It touched the peasant in the tavern, the beggar in the street, the monk in the cloister, the noble in his hall, the soldier in his camp. It was everywhere, woven into daily life as surely as bread, as water, as prayer. Drink was food, drink was medicine, drink was escape, and so the haze it brought was universal. From the lowest to the highest, from the poorest to the richest, no one was untouched. In weakness, they were equal. Imagine a village at night. The tavern is full, the laughter loud, the mugs heavy. Outside, beggars huddle in shadows, their voices slurred, their bodies swaying. Far away, in a monastery, monks raise their own mugs, their chants softened by drink. In a castle, nobles feast, their goblets spilling, their boasts growing wilder with every sip. On a road, soldiers sit by fires, their barrels nearly empty, their voices quiet, their faces heavy. Different lives, different places, yet the same haze surrounds them all, invisible but strong, linking them across walls and roads. Close your eyes and picture a morning across this world. In the village, peasants groan, their heads heavy, their work slower. In the cloister, monks confess quietly, their prayers softer, their discipline restored by habit. In the castle, nobles lie in chambers, their servants moving silently, their hangovers hidden behind velvet curtains. In the fields beyond, soldiers march again, their bodies sore, their memories dulled only slightly by drink. The haze lingers everywhere, its cost carried by all, its universality undeniable. The church spoke of sin, of weakness, of discipline. Physicians spoke of cures, of herbs, of balance. Villages spoke of tradition, of remedies, of stories. Yet beneath all the words, the truth was simpler. People drank because life was heavy, and drink made it lighter. Hunger, war, toil, fear, all pressed down, and a mug of ale or wine lifted it, even if only for a night. The haze was not only folly, it was survival, a fragile shield against a world that offered little comfort. Imagine a monk and a peasant meeting by chance, both unsteady, both carrying the weight of too much drink. Their robes and clothes are different, their lives worlds apart, yet in that moment they are the same. Their heads spin, their voices slur, their laughter rises. For a brief instant, the walls of wealth, of rank, of duty vanish. They are simply men, flawed, human, fragile, seeking escape. The haze unites them more strongly than prayer or coin, binding them in weakness that belonged to all. Some mocked this, some condemned it, some pitied it, but others understood. To drink was to reveal humanity, to strip away pride, to show the body's limits, the heart's needs. It was foolish, yes, but it was also honest. In haze, truth slipped out, confessions whispered, laughter unrestrained, sorrow unhidden. The medieval crackheads of the night revealed what all carried, though most hid it by day, the need for relief, the desire for joy, the inevitability of weakness. Imagine the sound of voices across centuries, across places, the songs in taverns, the chants in cloisters, the laughter in castles, the silence in camps, all touched by the same haze, all blurred by the same drink, all linked by the same folly. History remembers kings, wars, churches, laws. But beneath it all, there was always this rhythm, this universal intoxication, this human need that crossed every border, every class, every soul. Breathe slowly and let yourself drift into this truth. The Middle Ages were not only battlefields and cathedrals, not only peasants and lords, not only saints and sinners. They were also mugs lifted, voices slurred, laughter rising, memories dulled. The haze was everywhere, shaping nights, shaping mornings, shaping lives. To be human, then, was to stumble sometimes, to seek relief sometimes, to fall into haze sometimes. And in that, perhaps, they are not so far from us. Drunkenness in the Middle Ages was more than indulgence. It was a mirror, reflecting how people understood themselves, their neighbors, their world. To stumble in a tavern was not only to be weak, it was to be human, and communities responded in ways that revealed what they valued, sometimes with laughter, sometimes with cruelty, sometimes with compassion. The haze showed not only the body's limits, but society's rhythms, its beliefs about sin, about joy, about survival. Imagine a village watching a drunkard in the square. Some laugh, mocking his steps, his slurred words, his foolishness. Others pity him, offering bread, shaking their heads, whispering that he is not wicked, only weak. Children laugh loudly, repeating his staggering steps, while elders frown, remembering when they too once stumbled. The drunkard becomes lesson, entertainment, warning, and reflection, all at once. The community sees itself in him, even as it tries to distance itself from what it sees. Close your eyes and picture the rituals of punishment. Stocks in the square, whips in the street, signs hung round necks declaring sin. These were not only punishments, they were performances, lessons staged for the whole community. To mock the drunkard was to confirm one's own place, to prove one's own strength, to believe oneself different. Yet the pity that lingered, the bread quietly offered, revealed the truth. Everyone knew the line was thin, that anyone could stumble, that weakness was shared. Festivals showed another side. On holy days, when the whole community drank, when the whole village danced, when priests themselves lifted mugs, drunkenness became unity rather than shame. The haze leveled all, noble and peasant, priest and fool. For a brief moment, weakness was not condemned, but celebrated, turned into joy, into freedom, into release. Festivals reminded people that weakness was not failure, but part of life, part of being human, part of surviving in a world too heavy to face sober every day. Bettison and superstition added their own meaning. Remedies were not only about clearing the head or steadying the stomach. They were about showing that people cared, that communities remembered, that weakness deserved response. A wife preparing broth, an old woman tying herbs, a neighbor whispering of cures. These were gestures of care as much as of medicine. The remedies revealed a world where survival depended not on perfection, but on compassion, on helping one another endure both hunger and haze. Imagine a castle where nobles feast, their goblets endless, their laughter loud. The peasants outside whisper of their folly, mocking their pride, their waste, their drunken boasts. Yet in taverns, the peasants drink too, their mugs heavy, their laughter no different. Both are mocked in turn, the nobles by villagers, the peasants by priests, the drunkards by children, yet all are the same. Drunkenness crossed every wall, revealing the shared weakness that wealth could not erase, that poverty could not excuse, that faith could not banish. The haze carried danger too, fights, theft, accidents, sorrow. Communities feared it, and rightly so. But they also accepted it, because life was heavy, and drink was one of the few escapes that everyone could reach. Bread fed the body, ale softened the heart. Together they carried people through winters, through wars, through grief. To live without drink would have been unthinkable, not because people lacked strength, but because the burden of life demanded release. Breathe slowly and let yourself sink into this understanding. The haze was not only folly, not only weakness, not only shame. It was also relief, also laughter, also memory. It showed what it meant to be human in a world of toil and hunger, of war and fear. The medieval crackheads of history were not only clowns to laugh at, not only sinners to condemn. They were people, ordinary and fragile, their haze a reflection of the same needs carried by all: to endure, to forget, to laugh, to survive. The haze of the Middle Ages drifts slowly now, like smoke from a torch fading into night. We have walked through taverns filled with laughter and fights, through streets where beggars stumbled, through monasteries where monks brewed and sipped, through castles where nobles feasted, through battlefields where soldiers drowned their fear. Everywhere the same haze lingered. Everywhere mugs were lifted, voices slurred, songs rose and fell. Drunkenness was not the story of one man or one place, but of all, woven into the rhythm of medieval life. Imagine the world quiet now, the tavern shutters closed, the streets empty, the monastery bells silent, the castle halls dark, the battlefield still. The people sleep, scattered across cottages, cloisters, chambers, tents. Some lie heavily, their breaths slow, their bodies heavy with drink. Others stir, dreaming faintly, their minds still blurred, their heads still aching. Across fields and forests, across villages and towns, across lords and peasants alike, the haze lingers even in dreams, carrying them gently into silence. Close your eyes and picture the centuries passing. The torches burn low, the feasts end, the songs fade. The people are gone, their laughter forgotten, their footsteps silent. Yet their haze remains, remembered in stories, in records, in whispers. We see them not only as workers, as warriors, as lords, as priests, but also as drinkers, as fools, as fragile humans who stumbled, who sought escape, who lifted mugs to ease their burdens. Their haze is history, but also humanity, timeless and familiar. The Middle Ages are far from us now, their castles in ruins, their taverns long gone, their fields silent, and yet in some ways they are not so far. For people today still lift glasses, still seek relief in drink, still laugh too loudly, still stumble home under moonlight. The names have changed, The places have changed, but the haze remains, a reminder that weakness, folly, and joy are as old as humanity itself. The medieval crackheads were not strange, not distant, but reflections of the same desires we carry still. Imagine yourself drifting back from those centuries, the voices growing faint, the torches dimming, the laughter softer. The haze fades, leaving only silence, only the steady rhythm of your breath. The stories linger, but they no longer weigh heavy. They settle like dust on old stones, quiet, still, unmoving. The people rest, their mugs long empty, their songs long finished. You too may rest now, carried not by drink, but by calm, by stillness, by the gentle rhythm of history turned to lullaby. Breathe slowly, deeply, letting the weight of the night soften. The haze of the Middle Ages is gone, the torches extinguished, the songs silenced. All that remains is quiet, a vast and endless quiet, stretching across fields, across villages, across centuries. Let yourself sink into it, as peasants sank into straw beds, as nobles sank into velvet cushions, as soldiers sank into cloaks by fading fires. They rest now, and so may you. Sleep comes gently as history fades. The haze is gone, the story told, the world silent. Rest in the quiet, rest in the stillness, rest in the timeless truth that to be human is to stumble sometimes, to laugh sometimes, to seek relief sometimes. The medieval crackheads of history have given their stories, and now they sleep. Let their sleep guide yours, soft, deep, unbroken. The night is yours now. Drift slowly, calmly, into silence. Beyond ale and wine, there was another world of intoxication in the Middle Ages. Stranger, quieter, and often more dangerous. This was the world of herbs and potions, plants gathered from fields and forests, brewed in pots, dried in bundles, ground into powders. Some were used for healing, some for ritual, some for escape. In their leaves and roots lay power over the mind, enough to make a body sleep, enough to twist the senses, enough to bring visions that seemed to come from beyond. Imagine a healer walking through tall grass at dawn, her basket on her arm, her eyes sharp for what others overlook. She bends to pick henbane, its yellow flowers sharp with scent. She digs for mandrake, the root strange, shaped like a figure. She gathers nightshade, its berries dark and tempting. Each plant carries danger as well as cure. In the right measure, they soothe pain, ease sleep, calm fevers. In the wrong, they confuse the mind, blur the world, send the body into shivers and dreams. Close your eyes and picture her fire at night. The pot bubbles, steam rising, the room thick with smells both bitter and sweet. She grinds leaves between stones, sprinkles powders into the brew, whispers words as though to guide the plant's power. Those who come to her are desperate, a man with pain that keeps him from rest, a woman with grief she cannot carry, a traveler who seeks visions of what lies ahead. She gives them cups, her hands steady, her voice low. They drink, and soon their eyes grow heavy, their speech falters, their bodies sway. Some sleep deeply, others laugh, seeing shapes no one else sees. Others tremble, whispering of fire, of voices, of dreams that feel too real. To villagers, these effects were both feared and fascinating. Those who stumbled after strange herbs were called bewitched, possessed, touched by forces unnatural. Some whispered that demons had entered their bodies. Others thought they had glimpsed heaven, that angels had spoken through the haze. In truth, they were under the sway of plants, of chemicals not yet understood. But in the medieval mind, every vision carried meaning. Every trance was sign. Every delirious cry was message from realms unseen. Imagine yourself in such a trance. The walls flicker with shadow, though no fire burns. Voices whisper in your ear, though no one speaks. Your limbs feel both heavy and light, your breath shallow yet endless. Shapes move before your eyes, twisting, turning, beautiful and terrifying. You laugh, you cry, you mutter words that make no sense, though they feel like truth. Around you, villagers stare, half fearful, half amazed. You are no longer yourself. You are something else, caught between earth and heaven, between life and dream. Such visions carried risks. Many who drank too much of these potions never woke again. Others lingered in sickness, their bodies racked by fever, their minds broken. Yet the use continued, for pain was great, suffering constant, and escape tempting. To ease hunger, to forget grief, to see beyond. These were reasons strong enough to risk the dangers. And so, the medieval crackheads were not only in taverns, they were in cottages, in forests, in hidden corners, where herbs burned and potions steamed. Breathe slowly, and let yourself drift deeper into this world. The smell of bitter herbs fills the air. The sound of bubbling pots echoes softly. The sight of shadows dancing grows strange and heavy. To use these plants was to step outside of ordinary life, to walk briefly in another place, sometimes joyful, sometimes terrifying. In the Middle Ages, people sought escape not only in drink, but in the leaves of fields, in the roots of earth, in the whispered promises of herbs that twisted the mind. The use of herbs in the Middle Ages did not belong only to healers. It also drifted into the shadows of fear, into the realms of superstition, into the whispers of witchcraft. A potion that soothed pain might be called medicine by one, and sorcery by another. A trance brought on by herbs might be seen as holy vision by some, and as demonic possession by others. In this way, the line between healing and crime was thin, fragile, and often dangerous. Imagine a villager stumbling through the night after drinking too much of a bitter brew. His eyes are wide, his voice strange, his words tumbling like fragments of dream. He laughs at shadows, cries out to spirits, shakes as though cold, though the air is warm. To those who see him, he looks possessed, overtaken by forces unseen. They whisper quickly, crossing themselves, backing away. In their minds, no plant could do this, no root, no leaf. This must be the work of demons, of curses, of witches who walk unseen. Close your eyes and picture the fear that follows. A healer who gave the potion is now suspect. Her hands that gathered herbs, her lips that whispered blessings, her fire that boiled roots, all are seen in new light, dangerous light. Villagers whisper, priests warn, neighbors avoid her path. The same knowledge that once brought relief now marks her as dangerous. She knows too much, they say. She consorts with spirits, they say. Perhaps she is the reason the cows sickened, the reason the child fevered, the reason the bread spoiled. Suspicion grows heavier and heavier, until accusation becomes inevitable. These fears were not rare. Across Europe, stories spread of witches flying through night skies, their minds filled with visions from strange brews called ointments or salves. Henbane, mandrake, belladonna. Mixed together, they could numb the body, blur the mind, bring dreams of flight, of dancing, of meetings with spirits. To those who experienced it, it was dream, trance, escape. To others, it was proof of the devil's touch. Those who returned from such states, speaking of visions, were often condemned, their words twisted into evidence, their trances seen not as intoxication, but as pact with hell. Imagine yourself under such suspicion. You are a woman who knows the plants of the forest, who gathers them carefully, who dries them on your cottage wall. You have helped neighbors, easing births, calming fevers, softening pain. But now they look at you differently. They whisper of the strange smells from your chimney, of the herbs hanging in your home, of the muttered prayers you speak while working. A child sickens, and they glance toward your door. A man stumbles after drinking a potion, and they say you bewitched him. Soon a priest arrives, his eyes sharp, his words heavy. You know what this means. The herbs that once gave life now bring death to you, through accusation, through rope, through fire. This fear was stronger because the effects were real. People did laugh without reason, see visions, speak in voices not their own after consuming herbs. In a world where science was not yet a shield, such moments felt supernatural. To villagers, this was not intoxication, but proof of the unseen. And so the herb users, the experimenters, the seekers of altered states, became the medieval crackheads who crossed into danger, not only harming themselves, but drawing suspicion that could consume their lives. Breathe slowly, and let yourself drift into this tension. The smell of herbs lingers, the shadows flicker, the whispers rise. Healing and harm, vision and madness, medicine and sorcery, all blurred together. To use herbs in the Middle Ages was to walk a thin line between relief and ruin, between being called healer and being called witch, between life and fire. The risk was never only in the plants themselves. The greater danger was in how others saw you once the plants had done their work. The most unsettling part of herb-fueled trances in the Middle Ages was that they did not always happen to one person alone. At times, whole groups, even entire villages, fell into strange states together. Laughter spread like fever. Visions struck many at once. Bodies shook in unison as though moved by the same invisible hand. For people of that age, such events were terrifying. They saw not intoxication, not sickness, but the work of demons, of curses, of divine punishment poured out upon all. Imagine a village struck by ergot poisoning, though no one knows its name. Rye bread, dark and coarse, sits on every table. The harvest has been poor, the grain damp, the fungus hidden. Families eat, children chew, and soon strange things begin to happen. A woman cries out that fire burns inside her skin. A man stumbles into the square, shouting at visions only he can see. Children laugh and scream, running in circles until they collapse. Soon dozens are struck, the air filled with cries, with moans, with fearful prayers. To them, it is not spoiled bread. It is a curse, a plague, a punishment from heaven itself. Close your eyes and picture the chaos. The priest rings the church bell, calling the villagers inside, their bodies trembling, their eyes wide. He sprinkles holy water. He raises the cross. He chants prayers into the thick air. Mothers clutch children. Fathers kneel with hands shaking, voices whispering for mercy. But still the fits continue. The visions spread. The cries echo. No one understands. No one suspects the fungus hidden in their bread. Instead, they believe the devil walks among them, that witches have cursed their homes, that their sins have brought God's anger down upon their heads. There were other kinds of mass hysteria too, not from poison, but from the strange movements of the human mind. In parts of Europe, people were seized by what was later called the dancing plague. Entire crowds moved together, swaying, spinning, stamping their feet until exhaustion claimed them. Some collapsed and never rose again. To outsiders, it looked like madness, like possession. To those caught in it, it felt irresistible, as though an unseen force pulled their bodies into rhythm. The sight was both terrifying and mesmerizing. Men and women, sweating, laughing, crying, unable to stop, dancing until their legs gave way. Imagine yourself watching such a scene. A square filled with bodies, music rising though no musicians play, footsteps pounding against stone in endless rhythm. The air is heavy with sweat, with breath, with voices that shout and sing without meaning. Some faces shine with joy, others twist with pain, yet all move together as though bound by a single thread. Hours pass, then days, the dance continuing, unstoppable. To see it is to feel both awe and dread, unsure whether it is miracle or madness. Villagers explained these events through the language they knew. They blamed witches who poisoned wells, demons who seized bodies, saints who punished communities for sins left unconfessed. They brought crosses into squares, carried relics through streets, lit candles that burned through the night. They fasted, they prayed, they begged for mercy. Yet even as rituals filled the air, the trances continued until they ended as suddenly as they began, leaving exhaustion, confusion, and fear. In truth, some of these events were accidents of food, of disease, of exhaustion. Others were outbreaks of shared psychology, people swept up in collective fear, unable to break free once the wave began. But to those who lived through them, explanations were unnecessary. The experience itself was real enough. The fire in the veins, the visions before the eyes, the laughter and screams that filled nights. Breathe slowly and let yourself sink into this image. A village caught in frenzy, a hall filled with trembling bodies, a square echoing with endless footsteps. For those who saw it, the line between intoxication and possession blurred until it vanished. The medieval crackheads were not always individuals. Sometimes they were whole communities, caught together in strange dances, in cries, in visions, their lives momentarily undone by forces they could not name. In the Middle Ages, medicine was as much mystery as science. The apothecary's shop stood at the edge of knowledge and superstition, its shelves lined with jars, bundles of herbs, powders in small packets, bottles filled with liquids of uncertain color. To step inside was to step into a world where cure and poison often mingled, where the line between healing and intoxication was so thin it could vanish entirely. Imagine the wooden door creaking open, the air inside thick with scents, bitter roots, dried flowers, resin oil. The light is dim, candles flickering against shelves crowded with containers, some labeled, others not. Behind the counter, the apothecary moves slowly, his hands steady, his eyes sharp with calculation. He listens as you describe your pain, sleepless nights, aching joints, a sadness that lingers, a spirit weighed too heavily. He nods. He chooses from his jars, mixing leaves with powders, dripping liquid into a cup. He hands it to you with quiet words. Drink this, and you will rest. Close your eyes and picture yourself lifting the cup. The liquid is bitter, its tastes clinging to your tongue, its warmth spreading through your chest. At first, it eases pain. Your body loosens, your thoughts grow lighter, your breath steadier. But then, the edges of the world shift. The shadows flicker strangely. Sounds echo longer than they should. Your head feels heavy, yet strangely free. You laugh, though nothing is funny. You weep, though nothing is sad. The potion has not only soothed, it has carried you elsewhere, into a place of dreams, of confusion, of visions. Such mixtures were common. Some contained poppy, powerful enough to ease suffering, but strong enough to cloud the mind in haze. Others used henbane or hemlock, bringing sleep that sometimes became too deep to end. Even alcohol itself, distilled into stronger forms than ordinary ale, was used as medicine, poured into wounds, into cups, into bodies too weak to resist. For many, relief was real, but so too was intoxication. To heal often meant to stumble, to dream, to lose oneself in a fog that blurred body and spirit. The apothecary held a strange place in society. He was respected for his knowledge, yet feared for the same reason. His hands could cure or kill. His mixtures could bring peace or madness. Villagers whispered about his shop, both grateful and suspicious. If a potion healed, it was miracle. If it harmed, it was sorcery. He lived in the space between trust and doubt, between faith and fear. Imagine again his shelves. A jar of dried poppy heads, their scent sweet and heavy. A bundle of mandrake roots, twisted like human figures, a vial of opium tincture, dark and thick, glowing faintly in candlelight. Each ingredient carries promise, each carries threat. In his hands they are combined, measured, balanced. But the balance is fragile, a little too much, and the cure becomes curse. A little too little, and the sickness remains. Those who drank from his cups never knew which they would receive, healing sleep or dreams that led to madness. For some, the risk was worth it. Pain was constant, suffering daily, and even a few hours of rest felt like blessing. Others sought potions not for healing, but for escape. The weight of grief, the strain of toil, the ache of hunger, all could be softened by a drink from the apothecary's hand. And so, quietly, a shadow of dependence grew. The medieval crackheads were not only in taverns or in forests. Some sat in apothecaries, drinking mixtures meant for cure, but taken for their strange comfort, their ability to blur the harsh edges of life. Breathe slowly, and let yourself drift into this space. The shelves tower with jars. The air is thick with scent. The candlelight flickers, and the apothecary's quiet voice hums like a chant. To enter here is to step into a place where healing and intoxication are the same road, where the desire for rest can lead to visions, where the cure for pain may also be its own kind of chain. The apothecary of the Middle Ages walked a narrow path. His work was needed, yet his reputation was always uncertain. To some, he was healer, wise in the secrets of nature, able to ease pain when no priest could, able to quiet fevers when prayers went unanswered. To others, he was suspicious, a man who dealt with hidden forces, who kept powders that could kill as easily as cure, who might whisper too much to herbs and roots in the dark. Trust and fear clung to him in equal measure, and no one ever knew which would grow stronger. Imagine a woman stepping into his shop with her sick child. She looks at the shelves with hope and dread. She knows he can give something that might bring relief, that might cool the fever, that might save the life trembling in her arms. But she also knows that a wrong measure, a careless slip, could bring stillness instead of healing. Her eyes search his face, looking for honesty, for kindness, for reassurance. He speaks quietly, gathering what he needs, his hands moving with practiced calm. She watches, uncertain, torn between faith and fear. Close your eyes and picture the whispers outside. Neighbors talk of strange smells drifting from his chimney at night. They say he keeps bones among his herbs, powders among his jars that glow faintly in the dark. They say he speaks to no one but his customers, that he avoids the church, that he is too quiet, too watchful. Each rumor grows, shaping him into something both feared and fascinating. If he cures, it is skill. If he fails, it is sorcery. The same act judged differently, depending on outcome. Some apothecaries leaned into their mystery. They spoke little, their shops dim, their shelves crowded with oddities meant to impress. Dried lizards, snakeskins, jars of strange stones, half medicine, half performance, enough to keep people both trusting and wary. Others tried to soften their image, keeping open doors, speaking gently, reminding all that their work was service. not sorcery. Yet even then, suspicion remained. In a world where knowledge was scarce, too much knowledge was always dangerous. The line between apothecary and poisoner was thin. The same roots that eased pain could bring death if used differently. Mandrake, belladonna, hemlock, all powerful, all deadly, all sitting quietly on his shelves. And in times of conflict, when a nobleman fell sick, when a rival died suddenly, it was easy to point a finger at the man with powders and jars. Trials were held, confessions extracted, punishments dealt. Sometimes he was hanged, sometimes burned, sometimes merely driven away. His skill, once praised, became his curse. Imagine yourself standing in such a trial. The villagers gathered, their eyes sharp, their voices low. They hold up one of your jars, a dark powder spilling slightly onto the floor. They ask why you keep it, why you mix it, why you sell it. You answer calmly, saying it is for pain, for fever, for sleep. But they shake their heads. They speak of the man who drank and died, of the child who never woke, of the neighbor who swore you cursed her cow. Your words grow weaker as their whispers grow louder. The line between healer and poisoner vanishes, and the judgment falls. Yet still, the apothecary's role never disappeared. For all the fear, people needed his work. Pain was constant, sickness unending, and without his jars, many would suffer more. And so, the suspicion never erased him fully. It only kept him at the edge, always half trusted, half feared, always living with the knowledge that one wrong outcome could turn gratitude into hatred. Breathe slowly and let yourself feel the weight of his place. Shelves lined with powders, jars filled with shadows, whispers outside the door, hope and fear balanced in every hand that reached for his potions. To be an apothecary in the Middle Ages was to walk in this tension, healer and suspect, savior and danger, always one step away from trust, always one step away from ruin. For the ordinary people of the Middle Ages, the apothecary's potions were both comfort and danger. They came to his shop because pain was constant, sickness endless, and relief rare. They left with small packets of powder, small jars of liquid, instructions whispered softly. They drank because they hoped, but also because they feared what might come if they did not. And in that act, they sometimes found themselves stumbling into haze, into confusion, into something that felt like escape as much as cure. Imagine a farmer returning from the apothecary with a bottle in hand. His back aches from years of toil, his nights broken by pain that keeps him restless. He drinks the mixture slowly, grimacing at its bitterness. At first, warmth spreads through his chest, his body loosens, the ache softens. He sighs, the relief heavy and sweet. But then the room tilts slightly, the shadows blur. His head grows light. He laughs at nothing. His thoughts drift strangely. His body feels both heavy and free. He wanted only rest, but what he finds is something more. A step away from the world, into a place of dream. Close your eyes and picture a woman taking a draught for sleeplessness. The apothecary told her it would calm her, bring deep rest. She drinks, and soon her limbs grow heavy, her breath slows, her eyes flutter. But as she drifts, visions come, shapes moving in darkness, voices whispering her name, colors bright and strange. She wakes hours later, confused, unsure whether she slept or dreamed, whether the visions were real or not. The potion has worked, but it has also unsettled. She is calmer, yet also shaken, her mind touched by something she cannot explain. Some returned again and again, drawn not only by relief, but by the strange comfort of the haze. For them, the bitterness of the drink became familiar, the drifting thoughts almost welcome. They learned to crave the moments when pain softened and reality bent, even if only slightly. Their neighbors whispered of weakness, of foolishness, but still they returned, coins clutched tightly, desperate for the same relief. The medieval crackheads were not always drunkards in taverns. Sometimes they were quiet villagers, standing in line at the apothecary's shop, seeking potions that blurred the line between healing and intoxication. But not all experiences were gentle. Some potions brought sickness instead of sleep. A wrong measure of poppy left a man trembling, his breath shallow, his skin cold. Too much henbane left another laughing wildly, then screaming, then collapsing into silence. Families carried loved ones back to the apothecary, demanding answers, their grief heavy, their anger sharp. The same mixture that healed one could harm another, and no one knew why. Each visit was a gamble, each drink a step into uncertainty. Imagine the fear of waking after such a draught, your mouth dry, your head aching, your memory broken. You remember laughter, or crying, or visions of fire, but you are unsure if they were dream or truth. Around you, your family watches nervously, unsure if you are healed or harmed, unsure if you will rise or sink again. The potion has passed, but the unease lingers, a shadow that follows long after the taste is gone. And yet, people kept coming. They had no choice. Pain did not end. Hunger did not ease. Sleeplessness did not fade. The apothecary's jars offered the only hope of comfort, and comfort was worth the risk. They drank, they dreamed, they endured. They carried their confusion into the fields, into the markets, into the churches, whispering to one another of strange visions, of moments of peace, of nights of deep, heavy sleep. Breathe slowly, and let yourself drift into their world. The bitter taste on the tongue, the warmth spreading through the chest, the shadows shifting at the edge of vision. To live, then, was to accept this risk, to embrace the chance that healing might also bring haze, that rest might also bring dreams. The people of the Middle Ages walked this path without question, their lives shaped by the potions of apothecaries, their bodies soothed and confused, their minds slipping now and then into the strange, hazy world of intoxication. The monasteries of the Middle Ages were places of silence, of prayer, of discipline. But behind stone walls and within cloistered gardens, another rhythm of life pulsed, quieter yet no less powerful. Monks were not only guardians of faith, they were also brewers, distillers, makers of ale and wine. In their cellars and breweries, drink flowed as steadily as prayer, and sometimes the two blurred together until even the most devout felt the heavy haze of intoxication. Imagine a stone monastery, its walls cool, its halls echoing with chants. Beyond the chapel lies a small building, its roof dark with smoke, its air rich with the smell of malt and hops. Inside, monks bend over vats, stirring thick liquid, watching as steam rises. Wooden casks line the walls, each filled with ale at different stages of brewing. The monks work with quiet focus, their robes brushing against the floor, their hands steady on the wooden paddles. For them, brewing is labor, devotion, tradition, yet it is also pleasure, for the ale they create will not only sustain them, but also bring warmth to long nights. Close your eyes and picture them later, gathered in the refectory after prayer. Wooden mugs are filled, the liquid dark and foamy. At first they drink in silence, the rule of discipline holding. But slowly voices rise, a smile here, a laugh there, a story whispered, though stories are not permitted. The mugs empty, then fill again. Soon the hall is louder than the chapel, the monks forgetting themselves, forgetting silence, forgetting even prayers. Laughter rings, songs break out, and the night stretches far. These are holy men, yes, but also men with mugs in their hands, their bodies as susceptible to the haze as any peasant in a tavern. For monasteries, drink was both survival and indulgence. Water could not always be trusted, so ale was brewed for daily use. But it was stronger than small beer, heavier, richer. Monks drank not one mug, but many, each day, each night. Records speak of rations, generous enough to leave any man swaying. Some monasteries became famous for their brewing, their ales sought by nobles and travelers alike. What began as sustenance became craft. What began as necessity became reputation. And in the quiet of their cloisters, monks themselves became intoxicated, their cheeks flushed, their chants slurred. Imagine a monk returning to his cell after such a night. He stumbles slightly on the stone steps, his hand gripping the cold wall. His breath is heavy, his eyes clouded. He kneels to pray, but his words falter. His head bows lower, and soon he sleeps instead of speaking. His candle burns low, casting strange shadows on the wall. His body slumped in robes meant for devotion, but now folded in weariness. He has given himself to God, but tonight he has also given himself to drink. The church itself condemned drunkenness, yet its monasteries were filled with it. Sermons warned of excess, yet records show rations so large that excess was almost guaranteed. The contradiction was clear, but it was tolerated, explained, forgiven. Drink was God's gift, some said, meant to gladden the heart. To refuse it entirely was suspicion. To embrace it too fully was sin. And so monks walked the same thin line as villagers, between devotion and indulgence, between sanctity and folly. Breathe slowly and let yourself feel this strange rhythm. The chanting of monks in the chapel, the bubbling of vats in the brewery, the laughter of voices in the refectory, the silence of slumber in stone cells. To live in a monastery was to live close to God, but also close to ale, and sometimes the two met in the same breath. Even within the holiest walls of the Middle Ages, the haze of intoxication found its place, reminding all that even devotion could not silence the pull of the mug. Monasteries were not only places of prayer, they were also centers of craft, and among their greatest crafts was brewing. What began as necessity became art, refined over centuries, until monks were known as masters of ale and wine. Their drinks traveled beyond their walls, carried in jugs and barrels along roads, poured into mugs in taverns, sought after by nobles who wanted the best. To drink what monks brewed was to taste both skill and sanctity, though sanctity often blurred when too many mugs were emptied. Imagine the monastery brewery in full work. The air is thick with steam, heavy with the scent of malt and hops. Vats bubble, casks creak. Water runs steadily from wells into wooden tubs. Monks move quietly between tasks, stirring, measuring, pouring. They do not speak much, but their rhythm is precise, practiced. Each knows his role, each knows the steps, as though brewing were another form of prayer. The liquid transforms slowly, yeast working unseen, turning grain and water into drink that warms the body, dulls the mind, and fills the belly. Close your eyes and picture the barrels once they are finished. Dark wood bound with iron, filled to the brim, rolled carefully into cool cellars. The air there is damp, the ground stone, the silence broken only by the drip of water and the shifting of barrels. The monks mark them with symbols, knowing which batch is ready, which needs time. Travelers arrive to purchase, peasants to barter, nobles to demand their share. What was brewed behind walls of stone flows outward, touching lives far beyond the cloister. The reputation of monastic brewing grew so great that kings and lords favored their ales above all others. Records tell of monasteries shipping barrels to distant courts, their drinks praised as both pure and strong. Pilgrims on the road stopped at monasteries, not only for prayer, but for drink, their thirst quenched by mugs filled generously. Taverns proudly announced when they carried monk-brewed ale, their customers eager to taste what holy hands had crafted. And yet, the irony was always present. The same drink that brought respect to monasteries also left many who drank it, stumbling, laughing, singing out of tune. Imagine a feast where nobles gather, the tables heavy with roasted meats, the candles tall, the air thick with music and voices. Among the food sits casks, stamped with monastic marks, proof that the drink inside comes from holy cellars. Servants pour, mugs fill, lips taste. At first, the conversation is sharp, the laughter measured, the words polite. But as casks empty, as mugs fill again and again, the tone changes. Nobles lean too far across tables. Their words slur. Their songs grow loud. The drink meant for celebration now blurs their dignity, and they become not so different from peasants in taverns. Monastic ale has traveled far, and with it the haze of intoxication. The monks themselves were not blind to this contradiction. Some defended their brewing as charity, providing safe drink for those who could not trust water. Others admitted that it was also profit, helping fund the monastery. helping keep doors open and candles lit. Few, however, spoke of the excess of the laughter that grew too loud, of the monks who drank more than they should. It was a silence kept, a secret acknowledged, but never written too clearly. And still the reputation endured. Monastic brewing became a legacy, one that would outlive the Middle Ages, carried into later centuries, remembered even now. To think of monks is to think of prayer, but also of ale, of barrels stacked in cool cellars, of mugs raised in quiet halls. Their skill shaped not only their own lives, but the drinking habits of Europe itself, binding devotion and intoxication together in ways both holy and human. Breathe slowly, and let yourself drift into this image. The chants of monks in the chapel, the bubbling of vats in the brewery, the clatter of mugs in the refectory, the laughter of nobles in distant halls, all connected by the drink brewed behind monastery walls. The medieval crackheads were not only peasants in taverns, but also nobles and pilgrims, their haze born from the skill of men who prayed by day and brewed by night. The monastery was meant to be a place of discipline, of silence, of restraint, but within its walls, the very drinks brewed for survival often tested those vows. The monks who labored in prayer each morning found themselves tested again each evening, when mugs were filled and voices rose. For them, the contradiction was constant. To devote themselves to God meant purity. To devote themselves to brewing meant temptation. And between the two, they stumbled, sometimes literally, across the thin line that divided devotion from indulgence. Imagine the refectory at night. Long wooden tables stretch beneath dim candlelight, the air heavy with the smell of stew, of bread, of ale poured generously. The monks sit side by side, their robes brushing against one another, their heads bowed at first in prayer. Then the mugs rise, the meal begins, the sound of spoons against bowls filling the room. At first, silence holds, but silence is fragile. Soon a voice breaks it. Laughter follows. Mugs are lifted again. The air grows louder, warmer, heavier. The line between holy meal and tavern blur, until it feels as though the monastery has become its own kind of festival hall. Close your eyes and picture a monk slipping from the refectory, his steps uneven, his voice humming a tune beneath his breath. He should be heading to his cell for prayer, for study, for quiet reflection. Instead, he leans against the cold wall, his head spinning, his body swaying. He whispers words that make little sense, then laughs softly to himself, then drifts into sleep before his candle burns low. His vows bind him, but his body betrays him. The haze of drink is no respecter of devotion. The contradiction did not go unnoticed. Some abbots cracked down, limiting rations, punishing excess, reminding monks of their vows. They warned that drunkenness was sin, that it weakened prayer, that it opened the door to temptation. Others turned a gentler eye, tolerating what they saw as human weakness, forgiving indulgence as long as discipline returned by morning. Still others embraced it openly, seeing drink as God's gift, meant to be enjoyed as part of creation. Each monastery shaped its own balance, some strict, some lenient, all aware of the pull between devotion and indulgence. The outside world noticed too. Tales spread of monks who drank too heavily, who stumbled through prayers, who turned refectories into halls of laughter. Some mocked them, calling them hypocrites. Others envied them, seeing their full mugs as proof of wealth, their laughter as freedom denied to peasants. The image of the drunken monk became a familiar one, appearing in songs, in jokes, in stories told in taverns. Even within devotion, men saw themselves reflected, weak, flawed, but human still. Imagine a monk at confession, his voice low, his words halting. He admits to drinking too much, to letting laughter drown his prayers, to letting haze cloud his thoughts. The priest listens, nods, offers penance. The monk leaves, lighter, forgiven, yet knowing he will stumble again. The cycle is endless. Devotion, indulgence, confession, forgiveness. It was not only peasants who lived this rhythm. The holy lived it too, their weaknesses wrapped in robes, their sins hidden in shadows of cloisters. And yet the monastery endured. The contradiction did not break it. The vows held. The prayers continued. The chants rose each dawn. The monks may have stumbled at night, but they rose in morning, their voices steady, their discipline renewed. Perhaps that is what made their lives both human and holy. They were not untouched by weakness, but they did not surrender fully to it. They walked the same thin path as all others in the Middle Ages, caught between survival and sin, indulgence and discipline, always balancing, always slipping, always returning. Breathe slowly and let yourself drift into this tension. The chants of prayer echo softly. The mugs clink faintly. The laughter fades into silence. To be a monk in the Middle Ages was to live within this contradiction, to brew with one hand and pray with the other, to stumble and to rise, to fall into haze and to seek forgiveness again. The medieval crackheads were not only peasants in taverns, but monks in cloisters, men who found themselves caught between their vows and their mugs, between heaven and haze. If monasteries were places where drink was crafted, taverns were places where drink was consumed, loudly, messily, endlessly. The tavern was both shelter and chaos, both hearth and pit. For peasants, it was escape. For travelers, it was refuge. For outcasts, it was home. The tavern existed at the edge of order, a place where laughter turned to fighting, where friendship turned to rivalry, where the haze of drink ruled more strongly than any law or prayer. Imagine the tavern at dusk. The air is already thick, the floor covered with straw meant to soak up spills and filth. A single fire crackles in the hearth, its smoke mingling with the smoke of pipes, with the smell of sweat, with the stench of spilled ale soaking into the ground. Wooden benches line long tables, their surfaces scarred by knives, by mugs slammed too hard, by countless nights of careless hands. The door opens and closes, again and again. More villagers pushing inside, eager for warmth, for drink, for escape from the long day. Close your eyes and picture the sound. Voices rising, overlapping, shouting, laughing, singing. A mug clinks against another. A song begins at one end of the table and falters halfway through, but no one cares. A man pounds his fist in rhythm. Another slaps the table. Another lifts his mug to toast no one in particular. The din grows until it is almost music, a wild rhythm of voices, of laughter, of anger, always lurking beneath the surface. The tavern was more than drink. It was where news spread, where gossip grew, where disputes were born and sometimes settled. A man might hear of war, of famine, of distant kings while drinking ale beside neighbors. He might hear a story of bandits, of witches, of omens seen in the sky. Each word carried further when tongues were loosened by drink, until whole villages whispered the same tales by morning. Truth mattered little. In the haze of ale, words became what they sounded like, not what they were. And always there were the characters who never left. The drunkard who sat in the same corner every night, his beard stained, his voice slurred. The fool who danced for coins, who sang until his voice cracked, who begged for another mug. The fighter who started quarrels for no reason, his fists flying, his pride louder than his reason. These were the medieval crackheads of the tavern, the figures known by all, pitied, mocked, avoided, yet somehow always present. Imagine yourself sitting at a table, the mug heavy in your hand, the air thick, your ears ringing with the noise. Beside you, a man argues over a debt, his face red, his hand gripping a knife. Across the room, two men wrestle, their friends cheering them on, straw scattering beneath their feet. A woman laughs too loudly, her head thrown back, her drink spilling over her dress. The tavern is alive, its chaos almost overwhelming, yet strangely comforting, for it is the same chaos every night, the same faces, the same songs, the same haze of drink and noise. Fights were common, and sometimes deadly. Knives flashed, mugs shattered, blood spilled onto straw. The tavern keeper tried to restore order, but his voice was lost in the din, his hands too busy pouring ale and breaking fights that began again seconds later. The law rarely entered, for the tavern was its own law, its own world. What happened inside stayed inside, unless someone died, and even then justice was slow, uncertain, blurred by the drunken memories of those who saw. And yet, the tavern was not only chaos, it was also warmth, community, companionship. The same drunkard mocked for his weakness was also pitied, given bread when he had none, given drink when he could not pay. The same fights that drew blood were followed by laughter, by embraces, by songs that mended broken pride. It was a place of contradictions, where shame and joy, danger and comfort, ruin and relief all mingled in the same smoky air. Breathe slowly, and let yourself sink into this image. The fire crackles, the mugs clink, the voices rise and fall like waves. The tavern is alive, chaotic, endless, filled with figures both broken and joyful. To step inside was to step into a world where order vanished, where haze ruled, where medieval crackheads stumbled, laughed, fought, and dreamed in the same night, again and again. The tavern, for all its warmth and laughter, carried dangers that stretched far beyond spilled ale and drunken quarrels. It was a place where fortunes vanished, where thieves waited, where tempers flared, where ruin came quietly through dice or loudly through blades. For many, the tavern was not just escape. It was a trap, a place that pulled them deeper each night, until little remained but debts, bruises, and shame. Imagine a corner table where men lean close, the light dim, the air thick with smoke. Dice clatter across the wood, coins glint faintly in candlelight. At first, the laughter is easy, the bets small, the losses tolerable. But drink loosens restraint. The bets grow larger, the laughter sharper, the voices louder. Soon, a man throws his last coin, his hands trembling, his breath unsteady. He loses, as most do. The table erupts in shouts, in arguments, in fists slamming against wood. By morning, he has nothing, his wages gone, his family waiting with empty hands. The tavern has taken more than his money. It has taken his dignity, his hope, his strength. Close your eyes and picture a thief moving silently through the crowd. His steps are light, his eyes quick, his fingers skilled. He slips a coin purse from a belt, a ring from a hand, a cloak from a bench. The drinkers are too lost in their haze to notice, their laughter too loud, their arguments too sharp. By the time they stumble home, they realize what is gone, but by then it is too late. The thief is already gone, his prize hidden, his smile faint. The tavern has given him cover, and he returns again and again, feeding on the weakness of those who cannot resist drink. Fights, too, were constant, and not always harmless. A spilled mug, a careless word, a debt unpaid, each could spark violence. At first, it was shouts, fists, shoves, but knives were common, blades easy to draw, anger easy to fuel. Blood spilled quickly, soaking into straw, staining benches. Sometimes men stumbled away with wounds. Other times, they never rose again. Their bodies carried out at dawn, the crowd silent, the tavern keeper scrubbing the floor as though nothing had happened. The law was slow to act, if it acted at all. A dead drunk was rarely mourned by justice. And then there were the women of the tavern, who carried their own dangers and sorrows. Some came willingly, seeking laughter, seeking drink. Others worked, serving mugs, enduring hands that reached too far, voices that grew too loud. For them, the tavern was a place of risk, of endurance, of survival. They knew the dangers well, yet returned each night because coin was scarce, because survival demanded it. Their faces were known, their laughter practiced, their eyes sharper than they seemed. They too navigated the chaos, weaving between drunkards, gamblers, fighters, thieves. Imagine yourself sitting in such a place, your mug warm in your hand, your eyes scanning the room. A fight breaks out at one table, dice roll at another. A thief slips through shadows. A woman passes with a tray, her smile faint, her eyes wary. The noise rises, the air thickens, the heat of bodies presses close. You realize the tavern is alive, not with joy alone, but with danger that lingers in every corner, waiting to spill out. waiting to catch those who cannot resist its pull. For many, this danger was irresistible. The thrill of gambling, the rush of drink, the heat of fights, all drew men back night after night, even when they knew the risks. They lost coins, they lost teeth, they lost lives, yet still they returned. The tavern gave them something they could not find elsewhere: escape from hunger, from toil, from silence. Even ruin was better than emptiness. Breathe slowly and let yourself sink into this shadowed place. The clatter of dice, the whisper of thieves, the crack of fists, the slosh of ale. The tavern was warmth, but it was also danger. It was laughter, but also ruin. It was the place where medieval crackheads found their escape, and often their destruction, swallowed by the smoky air. The sticky floors, the endless nights that promised much and gave little. For all its dangers, the tavern was also a place where stories lived. In smoky air and noisy rooms, tales were told, stretched, twisted, and born anew. A drunkard's slurred words might become legend. A gambler's boast might become prophecy. A wanderer's tale might become truth by the time it reached the next village. The tavern was not only a place of drink, but of voices, weaving together fact and fiction until no one cared which was which. Imagine a man rising unsteadily from a bench, his mug still half full. His cheeks are flushed, his eyes bright, his voice thick with drink. He pounds the table, demanding silence, though none comes. Still, he begins his tale, speaking of battles he claims to have fought, of kings he claims to have met, of treasures buried beneath distant hills. The listeners laugh, cheer, shout questions. Some believe him, others mock him, but all are caught in the rhythm of his voice. His story grows wilder, his words slur, his gestures expand until he nearly falls. At the end, he collapses back onto his bench, his tale unfinished, his audience satisfied enough. Close your eyes and picture the gossip that spread here. A woman whispers to her neighbor that she saw a witch near the woods, gathering herbs at dusk. Her voice grows louder as ale loosens her restraint. Soon half the tavern knows, and by morning the whole village believes it. A merchant speaks of bandits on the road, his story exaggerated by each sip of wine, until the bandits are an army, until the danger feels near. By dawn, travelers are warned away, the roads avoided, fear spread by one man's drunken voice. The tavern was a breeding ground for rumor, for superstition, for legends that shaped how people lived. What was whispered here often became fact outside, repeated until no one remembered where it began. In a world without written news, without printing presses, without proof, words carried their own weight, their own truth, no matter how crooked their path. And sometimes stories were entertainment more than warning. Men boasted of hunts that never happened, of lovers they never had, of treasures they never saw. They laughed as they lied, and others laughed with them, knowing it was false, but enjoying the game. A drunkard telling a tale was not expected to be honest. He was expected to be loud, to be funny, to fill the smoky air with words that kept the night alive. Imagine the sound of such a night. One man shouts of dragons in the mountains. Another interrupts with claims of seeing ghosts in the churchyard. Another swears he saw the devil himself wandering the roads. The crowd cheers, mocks, claps, sings along with fragments of the tale. The truth is irrelevant. What matters is the noise, the rhythm, the way words flow like ale, spilling, messy, unstoppable. These stories were as intoxicating as the drink itself, blurring reality into something stranger, softer, easier to bear. The tavern keeper, too, played a role in these stories. He heard them all, night after night, his ears filled with the same boasts, the same lies, the same gossip repeated until it wore grooves into memory. He knew which were harmless, which were dangerous, which might lead to fights or fear. He poured drink, he broke quarrels, he listened quietly, knowing that the stories were part of his trade as surely as ale. And so, the tavern became a place where history itself was shaped, not written history, but the living history of rumor, of tale, of voice. From the haze of drink came legends that outlived their speakers, stories carried from village to village, altered and retold until they became myths. The medieval crackheads were not only drinkers and fighters, but storytellers, weaving lies and truths into the smoky air. Their words as intoxicating as their mugs. Breathe slowly and let yourself drift into this soundscape. Voices rising and falling, stories colliding, laughter breaking into arguments, songs filling the gaps between words. The tavern was alive, not only with drink, but with tales. Wild, foolish, dangerous, beautiful. To sit there was to drown in noise and story. To be carried by words as much as by ale. To live for a night in a world where everything was possible, because someone, somewhere, claimed it was so. Far outside the taverns, beyond the monastery walls, the streets of medieval towns carried their own haze. Here, drink spilled into alleys, into squares, into markets. The poor, the beggars, the fools, all lived their intoxication in public, where everyone could see. In the daylight, they were scorned. At night, they were feared. To walk the streets after dark was to walk among shadows, some stumbling, some singing, some shouting words no one could understand. For the townspeople, they were both nuisance and warning, reminders of weakness, of sin, of poverty too close for comfort. Imagine a narrow, cobbled street at dusk. The market has closed. The stalls are empty. The air heavy with smoke from cooking fires. From a corner, a man stumbles into view. His clothes are torn, his face unshaven, his steps uneven. He leans against a wall, muttering, his voice thick with drink. Passers-by glance quickly, then look away. Children laugh at him, throwing stones, running when he shouts. A woman crosses herself and walks faster. He is familiar. Everyone knows him, but no one truly sees him. He is part of the street, like the broken stones, like the stray dogs, like the filth in the gutter. Close your eyes and picture another scene. A group of beggars huddle near a church wall. They hold out their hands, their voices low, asking for coin, for bread, for anything at all. Some are sober, their faces pale with hunger. Others are drunk, their words slurred, their bodies swaying. They sing off-key, they laugh at nothing. They curse those who pass without giving. To the villagers, they are shameful, the living image of weakness. To the beggars themselves, drink is escape, warmth against cold, forgetfulness against hunger. They live in haze, because haze is all they can afford. The fools of the town, too, were often drunk. Some were touched by madness, their minds broken by sickness or by life. Others simply played the role, making jests for coins, pretending foolishness to hide hunger. Drink sharpened both kinds, making their words wilder, their laughter louder, their steps more unsteady. They danced in squares, they mocked lords, they sang crude songs about priests. The crowd laughed, sometimes cruelly, sometimes with pity. Yet, even as they mocked, they were drawn to these figures, for they said things no one else dared, truths hidden in madness, sharpness hidden in slurred words. Imagine walking home through the town at night. The torches burn low, shadows stretch across walls, voices echo strangely in narrow streets. A man sleeps in the gutter, his hand still clutching a mug. Another shouts to the stars, his words nonsense, his body swaying. A group argues near the tavern door, their shouts sharp, their fists ready. Somewhere, a woman sings softly, her tune sweet but broken, carried on air-heavy with smoke and ale. The night is alive with the sounds of those who live in haze, their presence inescapable, their voices filling silence with restless noise. The authorities tried to control them. Drunkards in the street were fined, beaten, thrown into the stocks. Beggars were chased away, their hands struck aside, their voices silenced. Fools were tolerated, mocked, sometimes paid, sometimes punished. But none could truly be removed. They returned each night, each morning, because their lives were shaped by hunger, by drink, by despair. The law pushed them down, but the streets always pulled them back up again. And so they remained part of the town's fabric, both despised and familiar. People cursed them, yet also gave them bread. Children mocked them, yet also feared them. Priests condemned them, yet also pitied them. They were the medieval crackheads of the street, too visible to ignore, too common to erase, too human to dismiss completely. Breathe slowly and let yourself sink into this image. Narrow streets, torchlight flickering, shadows moving, voices rising and falling. To walk here was to walk among figures half real, half dream, their lives blurred by drink, their faces hidden in haze. The town itself seemed intoxicated, its nights filled with stumbling steps, with laughter too loud, with cries too sharp. In this world, intoxication was not hidden. It was part of the street, part of the night, part of the life that all knew and all endured. The streets of medieval towns were full of noise, full of haze, and the authorities could not ignore it. Drunkards who caused trouble, beggars who shouted too loudly, fools who mocked too freely. All of them risked punishment, and the punishments themselves were designed not only to correct but to humiliate. The law did not always lock people away. Instead, it turned them into spectacle, reminders to all of what happened when one let drink and folly go too far. Imagine the village square on a bright morning. The market stalls are full. The church bell tolls. The people gather. At the center stand the stocks, heavy wood bound with iron, waiting for their next occupant. Soon, a man is dragged forward, his eyes bloodshot, his clothes stained, his head hanging low. He shouted too loudly the night before, or struck someone in anger, or simply drank until he could not stand. Now he is placed in the stocks, his head and hands locked, his body bent forward for all to see. Close your eyes and picture the crowd. Some shake their heads, muttering about weakness, about sin. Others laugh, throwing scraps of food, bits of mud, cold water that drips down his back. Children jeer, mimicking his staggering steps, shouting crude songs in imitation. The man endures, silent or cursing, his face red with shame or pale with anger. Hours pass slowly, each one heavy, until he is released, sore, humiliated, yet already thinking of the next mug he will lift. The stocks were not the only punishment. Some drunkards were made to carry heavy stones through the streets, or to wear signs around their necks declaring their sin. Others were whipped in public, each strike meant to burn not only the flesh but the memory into all who watched. In towns with pillories, men stood upright, their arms and head locked, their faces exposed to every insult, every thrown object, every mocking word. The punishment was less about the crime itself than about the display, the warning to others that excess brought shame. Imagine the sound of such a punishment, the crack of the whip against skin, the jeers of the crowd, the muttered prayers of the condemned, the air thick with both pity and cruelty. For the crowd enjoyed what they saw, even as they pretended to condemn it. To them, this was entertainment as much as lesson, a way to laugh, to mock, to feel themselves stronger, better, safer. The man in the stocks was a mirror, showing them what they might become, but also a shield, letting them believe they were different. The church also played its part. Priests preached sermons against drunkenness, against folly, against the sins of the body. Some forced drunkards to confess in public, to kneel in the square and beg forgiveness. Others ordered them to fast, to walk barefoot to holy sites, to bear crosses as penance. The message was clear. Excess was not only weakness but sin, one that endangered not only the body but the soul. And yet, even the priests who preached so harshly were sometimes seen staggering after too much wine, their own haze forgiven quietly while others were condemned. Punishment could be cruel, but it was rarely permanent. The same men returned to the streets, to the taverns, to the haze. The cycle repeated, night after night, year after year. Drink pulled them back, poverty pushed them forward, and punishment became simply part of their lives, endured as much as hunger or cold. The law humiliated, but it did not cure. The stocks were filled again and again. The whip cracked over and over. the same faces appearing, the same voices jeering, the same cycle repeating endlessly. Breathe slowly and let yourself drift into this image. The square crowded, the stocks filled, the laughter rising, the cries echoing. To be a drunkard in the Middle Ages was not only to stumble in the streets, but to kneel in the square. Your weakness displayed to all. The punishment was not only physical, but public, woven into the fabric of town life. A ritual of shame that reminded everyone of the thin line between respectability and ruin. The medieval crackheads bore this burden not once, but many times, their lives circling endlessly between haze, punishment, and return. Public punishments in the Middle Ages were not simply moments of discipline. They were moments of theater, woven into the life of the town, shaping how people looked at one another, how they judged, how they forgave. The drunkard in the stocks, the beggar whipped, the fool mocked. They were not hidden away but displayed, turned into a mirror for all who passed. And the crowd itself became part of the punishment, their laughter and jeers, carrying as much sting as the whip or the wood. Imagine the market square on a bright morning. A man sits locked in the stocks, his head low, his hands stiff, his body aching from the cold. Around him, villagers gather, their voices sharp with laughter, their faces filled with curiosity. They throw fruit to spoiled to eat. They splash him with water. They taunt him with songs. He shifts uncomfortably, but he cannot escape, his shame stretched out for all to see. For the villagers, it is amusement, a story to repeat at supper. For him, it is hours of humiliation, each moment heavier than the last. Close your eyes and picture the children. They laugh the loudest, unafraid, their small hands quick to throw stones or scraps. They mock his staggering, his slurred words, his foolishness. To them, he is lesson and entertainment, proof of what not to become, yet also someone to laugh at while the day passes. Their mothers scold them, but softly, for they to laugh behind their hands. The man in the stocks is everyone's target, and in making him lesser, the crowd feels itself stronger. But not all laughter was cruel. Some watched with pity, their eyes soft, their voices quiet. An old woman might slip bread into the punished man's hands, whispering that she remembers when her son stumbled the same way. A neighbor might shake his head, remembering nights when drink pulled him close to the same fate. Not all mocked. Some sighed, knowing that the man in the stocks was not monster or villain, but simply weak, human, caught in a cycle that no punishment could break. Imagine the silence of night after such a day. The square empty, the punishment ended. The man walking home slowly, his body stiff, his spirit heavy. He passes the same neighbors who jeered, the same children who mocked, the same priest who condemned. Their eyes follow him, some with pity, some with scorn, some with indifference. He lowers his head, ashamed, but already he knows the pull of drink will return. Tomorrow, or next week, he will stumble again, and perhaps find himself back in the stocks, his shame repeated, his body once more the stage for the crowd. The community's role in punishment was both cruel and necessary. To laugh was to distance themselves. to believe they were safe, different, stronger. To pity was to acknowledge the truth that any one of them might fall, that weakness lived in all hearts. This tension shaped the way punishment was remembered. Some spoke of the fool in the stocks with cruel humor, retelling his cries. Others remembered quietly, with unease, with the thought that perhaps it could be them one day. The church encouraged the spectacle, reminding villagers that each punishment was warning, each drunkard a lesson. But people shaped the meaning themselves. For some, it was entertainment. For others, it was tragedy. For most, it was both, a mixture of laughter and sorrow that mirrored the contradictions of life itself. Breathe slowly and let yourself drift into this scene. The crowd gathered, the laughter rising, the silence of pity lingering in a few eyes. The punishment ends, but the memory remains, woven into the life of the village, into the rhythm of days and nights. To be a medieval crackhead in the streets was not only to stumble in alleys, but to be displayed, mocked, pitied, remembered, forgotten, all in the same breath. Their lives were public, their weakness shared, their shame both cruelly enjoyed and quietly understood. If ordinary nights in taverns brought drunkenness and shame, festivals and holy days turned it into celebration. In the Middle Ages, the calendar was full of feast days, saints' days, holidays marked not by work but by rest, food, and above all, drink. On these days, the rules loosened, the punishments paused, and the whole community stepped into the haze together. What was normally sin became tradition, and the very chaos that priests condemned on other nights was suddenly blessed, even sanctified. Imagine the square on such a day. Banners hang from windows, flowers are scattered across the cobblestones, torches burn even in daylight. The market stalls are filled with food, tables are set with bread, with roasted meats, with jugs of ale and wine. The people gather, their faces bright, their voices lifted in song. The bell of the church rings, but not for prayer. It rings to mark the feast, to call everyone into joy. Children run, dogs bark, women laugh, men raise mugs, the whole town alive in sound and color. Close your eyes and picture the drink flowing freely. Jugs passed from hand to hand, mugs filled again and again. Ale foams, wine spills, mouths laugh and sing. The air grows thick with smoke and sound. At first, the joy is steady, orderly, but soon, as the drink deepens, the order breaks. Songs grow louder, dances wilder, laughter sharper. Someone falls, someone shouts, someone kisses too freely. The feast becomes blur, the square becomes haze. The line between celebration and chaos vanishes. For the church, these festivals were dangerous, yet also necessary. They gave people release, a chance to forget hunger, toil, grief. The priests warned against excess, but they also joined in, lifting mugs, laughing with neighbors, stepping for a night into the same rhythm. Even monasteries marked feast days with extra rations, their halls louder, their chants softer, their mugs heavier. On these days, drunkenness was not condemned. It was allowed, even expected, for everyone to stumble together, to share both joy and folly as a single community. Imagine a procession winding through the streets. At its head, a statue of a saint carried high, flowers scattered beneath, candles flickering in the air. Behind it, villagers sing, their voices uneven but full. Some stumble, mugs still in hand, their songs more laughter than hymn. Yet still, the procession moves, winding through alleys, circling the square, ending with dances that last into the night. Holiness and haze walk side by side, neither questioned, both accepted. The Feast of Fools was the clearest example of this. On that day, roles were reversed. Peasants mocked lords, fools mocked priests. The world turned upside down. Drink fueled it, loosening tongues, making the mockery louder, bolder. Priests dressed as animals. Children pretended to give sermons. Villagers crowned a fool as bishop for the day. The crowd laughed, sang, drank until their voices cracked. For one night, order vanished, and folly ruled, its haze thick and unstoppable. Festivals carried danger, too. Fights broke out as easily as laughter. Debts forgotten in the morning became quarrels by evening. Accidents filled the streets, but these were tolerated, even forgiven. To stumble during a feast was not shameful, it was normal. Everyone stumbled, everyone laughed, everyone forgot themselves. The community allowed it, because to deny it would have been to deny joy itself. Breathe slowly, and let yourself sink into this image. The square filled with banners, with torches, with voices lifted in song. The mugs heavy, the tables full, the air thick with haze. For a day, the medieval crackheads were not mocked, not punished, but welcomed, for everyone became like them. The feast was intoxication shared, a brief escape from hunger and toil. A moment when the whole village drowned together in laughter, in song, in drink, in haze. Festivals in the Middle Ages were meant for joy, for celebration, for release. But joy is fragile, and release can quickly become chaos. When drink flowed too freely, when crowds pressed too close, when tempers burned hotter than the torches in the square, the feast turned dark. What began as laughter ended in blood. What began as song ended in shouts. What began as dance ended in bruises, in ruin, in sorrow. The same festivals that brought people together could also tear them apart. Imagine a square filled with hundreds of voices, the air thick with smoke and music. At first, it is laughter, songs rising, mugs clinking. But as the night deepens, the crowd grows restless. One man spills ale on another. Words are exchanged. Fists fly. Soon the fight spreads. Friends pulled in. Enemies found in strangers. Knives flash. Torches fall. The square fills with cries that no longer sound like celebration. The feast has turned, and in the morning, blood stains the cobblestones where flowers were scattered only hours before. Close your eyes and picture the accidents. A man too drunk to walk stumbles into a fire, his clothes catching flame, his cries piercing the night. Children run wildly through the crowd, lost in the press of bodies, unable to find their parents again until dawn. A woman falls while dancing, trampled by feet too unsteady to notice. These were not rare. Festivals carried joy, but they also carried danger, and the dangers were accepted as part of the price of release. The church warned of this constantly. Priests preached that drink turned celebration to sin, that laughter too loud became the devil's song, that fights born of ale were proof of weakness. They scolded, they threatened, they punished after the fact. But when the next festival came, the same cycle repeated. The sermons could not erase the need for release, the hunger for joy. And so the priests themselves often joined, their words lost in the same haze they condemned. Villagers remembered both sides of festivals. They remembered the joy, the dances, the songs that echoed through the night. But they also remembered the tragedies. The man who drowned after falling into a river too drunk to swim. The woman who miscarried after being caught in a fight. The boy who never returned after running into the crowd. These stories became warnings, told in whispers, yet never strong enough to end the festivals themselves. The hunger for escape was stronger than the fear of sorrow. Imagine yourself walking home after such a feast. The streets are littered with broken mugs, with scraps of food, with bodies lying in gutters, asleep or unconscious. The air smells of smoke, of ale, of sweat, of blood faintly mixed in. Some laugh still, their voices cracked, their songs slurred. Others weep quietly, mourning what was lost. The joy has passed, but the weight remains, pressing down on the village as dawn breaks over silent streets. And yet, when the next feast day came, the people returned. They hung banners, they prepared food, they brewed ale, they lit torches, they laughed and sang as though the last tragedy had never happened. The memory of sorrow was always there, but so too was the need for joy, for escape, for a day without toil, for a night without silence. The cycle continued, feast after feast, laughter and sorrow woven together, inseparable. Breathe slowly, and let yourself drift into this rhythm. The banners hang, the torches burn, the mugs clink, the songs rise, the cries echo. Festivals in the Middle Ages were both joy and danger, both laughter and blood. The medieval crackheads were not only mocked and punished, but celebrated, for during these days everyone joined them. Everyone stumbled, everyone fell into the same haze. And when the joy turned dark, when the night ended in chaos, it was not only theirs to bear. It belonged to the whole village, woven into the life of feast and famine, prayer and drink, laughter and grief. Festivals in the Middle Ages did not end when the torches burned out, or when the last song faded into silence. They lingered, etched into memory, retold in kitchens, in fields, in taverns. They became stories, passed from mouth to mouth, half legend, half warning. A feast was never only one day. It echoed across weeks and months, shaping how people remembered their village, their neighbors, themselves. Imagine the morning after a feast. The square is quiet, the cobblestones scattered with scraps of bread, broken mugs, bits of wilted flowers. A few men still lie asleep in doorways, their bodies heavy, their breaths slow. Women sweep, muttering about the noise, about the chaos, about the shame of it. Children run, laughing, picking up coins dropped in the dark, boasting of sights they saw. Slowly, the memory begins to take shape, the night retold in fragments, each voice adding, changing, exaggerating. Close your eyes and picture the stories growing. One man boasts that he drank more than anyone else, his words slurred though the night is long past. Another insists he saw a fight so fierce it could have started a war, though in truth it was only two drunkards stumbling. A woman remembers dancing until her shoes tore, her laughter rising as she tells it again. The tragedy, too, is remembered. The boy lost in the crowd, the man beaten, the woman weeping. Each story becomes sharper with telling, more vivid, more alive. Soon the feast becomes not just memory, but legend. The church shaped these memories too. Priests preached about the dangers of excess, reminding villagers of fights, of accidents, of sins confessed afterward. They painted the feast as warning, as proof that too much joy led only to sorrow. Yet their voices were not the only ones. Others retold the feast with laughter, with fondness, with pride. To them, the chaos was part of life, part of what made the village whole. Both versions lived side by side, woven together, inseparable. Imagine an old man telling children of a feast long past, his voice low, his eyes bright. He speaks of songs sung until dawn, of torches burning like stars, of laughter so loud it shook the windows. He leaves out the fight, the blood, the tears. His story is joy, his memory sweetened, his voice soft as he carries the past into the present. Then imagine another telling, quieter, heavier. A woman remembers her brother falling that night, never rising again. Her story is warning, her voice shadowed, her memory too heavy to soften. Both speak truth, but truth itself has split, shaped by how it is remembered. Festivals lived on in these retellings. Some became legends of joy, the night when the whole village danced, when the fool's songs echoed, when even the priest laughed. Others became warnings, the night when too much drink ended in ruin, when laughter turned to cries, when haze carried sorrow instead of joy. The stories shaped how children saw the world, how villagers saw themselves, how memory lived beyond the night. And so festivals were not only moments of intoxication, but threads in the fabric of life. They taught lessons. They created legends. They bound people together in joy and in grief. The medieval crackheads of the feast were remembered not only for their folly, but for their role in these stories, their drunkenness woven into memory itself. They were both clowns and caution, both laughter and warning. Their haze turned into tales that lasted far longer than the ale in their mugs. Breathe slowly and let yourself sink into this lingering memory. The square is quiet now, the torches long extinguished, the songs faded, but the stories remain, whispered in kitchens, retold in fields, laughed over in taverns. The feast never ends completely. It lives on in memory, in legend, in warning. And within those memories live the medieval crackheads, stumbling forever through the haze of celebration, their laughter and sorrow echoing across centuries, their presence as much story as history. Not everyone in the Middle Ages belonged to a village or a town. Some lived on the margins, wandering, drifting, carrying little more than the clothes on their back and the haze in their minds. These were the outcasts, the wanderers, the men and women who never settled, who survived by begging, by stealing, by entertaining, and often by drinking. For them, intoxication was not a passing moment in a feast or a tavern. It was their constant companion, the rhythm of their days, the shadow that followed them across roads and fields. Imagine a dusty road at dusk. The sun sets low, the fields stretch wide, the sky burns red. Along the path, a man walks alone, his steps uneven, his body swaying. His clothes are ragged, his hair unkempt, his eyes glassy with drink. He mutters to himself, sometimes laughing, sometimes cursing, his words broken fragments of memory and dream. He carries no home with him, no coin in his purse, only a mug tied to his belt, ready for the next tavern, the next jug of ale. Travelers pass him quickly, some with pity, others with fear, for his presence is a reminder of what happens when a man falls too far. Close your eyes and picture the wandering fool. He arrives in a village square, his voice loud, his body unsteady, his laughter endless. He jests, he sings, he dances poorly, his audience a mixture of laughter and scorn. Children chase him, throwing scraps, mocking his foolishness. Men jeer, women shake their heads. Yet someone gives him a coin, someone else a mug, and so he survives another day. His foolishness is his mask, his drink his comfort, his wandering his life. He moves from town to town, known by none, remembered by all, his image blurred by both laughter and pity. Others wandered not by choice, but by need. Poverty pushed them from homes. Famine drove them from villages. War scattered them across the land. Drink became their escape, the only warmth in cold nights, the only forgetfulness against hunger. They gathered in small groups, begging together, sharing what little they found. A jug passed among them was more than drink. It was survival, comfort, community in a world that otherwise cast them aside. To see them was to see weakness, but also resilience, a determination to keep living even when all else had been lost. Imagine a camp at the edge of the woods. A fire flickers. Shadows move across tired faces. They pass a jug from hand to hand, each sip warming, each sip dulling the sharpness of hunger. One begins to sing, his voice cracked but steady. Another laughs too loudly, her eyes glinting with both joy and sorrow. Another stares into the fire, silent, lost in thought, blurred by haze. They have nothing, yet in this moment they share something. A small circle of warmth, a brief escape from the endless road. Society looked at them with suspicion, sometimes with cruelty. Villages closed their gates. Towns chased them out. Priests condemned their wandering as sinful. To be rootless was already dangerous. To be drunk as well made them outcasts twice over. They were accused of theft, of violence, of spreading disease. Some were beaten, others imprisoned. Many simply turned away. Yet, despite rejection, they returned again and again, for they had nowhere else to go. Their lives became cycles of exile and return, always moving, never belonging. And yet, they were part of the medieval landscape, as familiar as the peasants in the fields, as the lords in their halls, as the monks in their cloisters. They appeared in songs, in jokes, in warnings, told to children. They were mocked, they were pitied, they were feared, but they were never entirely forgotten. To live in the Middle Ages was to know them, to see them stumbling on roads, begging in squares, singing in taverns, drinking in shadows. They were the medieval crackheads of the open road, their intoxication, their constant companion, their wandering, their fate. Breathe slowly and let yourself drift into this image. The road stretches endlessly. The campfire flickers faintly. The jug passes from hand to hand. Laughter, song, silence, sorrow, all carried together in the haze. To wander in the Middle Ages was to carry your intoxication with you, visible to all, shaping how the world saw you, shaping how you survived. The outcasts lived on the edge of society, yet their presence filled its roads, its stories, its memories, their haze drifting endlessly across the land. The wanderers of the Middle Ages lived in constant tension with the settled world. Villagers saw them arrive with suspicion, their ragged clothes and glassy eyes marking them as both needy and dangerous. Some offered bread or coins, moved by pity, by charity, by fear of God's judgment. Others turned them away, closed doors, shouted curses, even raised hands against them. To live as a wanderer was to live at the mercy of others, never knowing if the next village would bring kindness or cruelty. Imagine a small group arriving at a village gate. They are thin, their clothes torn, their steps slow. One carries a jug, another leans on a stick, another hums a broken tune. They ask for shelter, for food, for work. The gatekeeper frowns, suspicious. Behind him, villagers whisper, some muttering prayers, others muttering curses. A few toss scraps of bread, quickly, as if afraid to come too close. Others shout, telling them to move on, to carry their filth and their haze elsewhere. The group lingers, uncertain, until finally they drift back to the road, their hunger heavier than before. Close your eyes and picture a different scene. A nobleman passing through sees a beggar in the road. He tosses a coin, not out of kindness, but out of duty. A gesture meant for heaven's eyes more than the beggar's. The beggar bows low, his thanks slurred, his hand trembling. The nobleman rides on, his conscience lighter, though the beggar's burden has hardly changed. Charity was given, but rarely enough. It was a thread, thin and frayed, never strong enough to lift the wanderer from his place. The church urged compassion, reminding people that Christ himself had walked among the poor, that to give was holy, that to refuse was sin. Monasteries often gave bread, sometimes ale, sometimes a corner of shelter. But the church also condemned drunkenness, and many wanderers were visibly drunk. To priests, this was both weakness and sin, proof that charity might be wasted. that mercy might be misplaced. They preached forgiveness, yet scorned those who could not leave the haze behind. The contradiction hung heavy, never resolved, shaping how wanderers were treated, pitied yet judged, helped yet condemned. Imagine a wanderer caught stealing bread from a market stall. He is dragged through the square, his body frail, his eyes wild. The villagers shout, some angry, some mocking, some sorrowful. He is beaten, perhaps placed in the stocks, perhaps whipped before being driven away. To them he is thief, not victim. His hunger is no excuse, his drink no forgiveness. He leaves the village weaker, his body bruised, his spirit dim, yet still he walks, for the road has no end. Some wanderers learned to perform, to earn survival through laughter, through song, through spectacle. They became traveling fools, jesters without courts, their drunkenness both mask and stage. Villagers threw them coins for their songs, laughed at their jests, jeered at their stumbles. For a night they were welcomed, their haze entertainment rather than shame. But by morning they were cast out again, their place once more at the edge, their lives once more a cycle of brief welcome and longer exile. The suspicion never faded. Wanderers were blamed for theft, for disease, for curses. If crops failed, it was their fault. If sickness spread, they carried it. If children vanished, they were accused. Fear clung to them, stronger than pity, shaping every encounter. To see them was to see danger, even when all they carried was hunger and haze. And yet their presence was constant, unavoidable. Roads and towns were filled with them, reminders that life in the Middle Ages was fragile, that anyone could fall, that poverty was only a harvest or a war away. They were outcasts, but also warnings, living proof of how thin the line was between belonging and exclusion, between survival and ruin. Breathe slowly and let yourself drift into this fragile space. The road stretches, the gates close, the voices rise in pity and in scorn. To live as a wanderer was to live at the mercy of others, sometimes welcomed, more often rejected, always watched with suspicion. The medieval crackheads of the road carried not only their haze, but also the weight of judgment. Their lives shaped as much by others' eyes as by their own steps. The wanderers of the Middle Ages did not vanish when they left a village. They lingered in memory, in rumor, in story. People spoke of them around hearths, in taverns, in fields. They became part of folklore, woven into the fabric of tales told to children, warnings whispered to neighbors, songs sung by fools. Some were remembered as thieves, others as holy fools, others as strange, mysterious figures who lived outside the rules of ordinary life. In this way, the medieval crackheads of the road became both forgotten and unforgettable, shadows in history that flickered on in legend. Imagine a mother warning her children. She points toward the road, telling them not to wander too far, not to follow strangers, not to become like the drunkards who drift from village to village. She speaks of their hunger, their filth, their glassy eyes. She tells of how they beg, how they steal, how they sleep in ditches. Her words are warning, her tone sharp. To her children, the wanderer is a figure of fear, a story meant to keep them close, to keep them safe. In this way, the drunkard of the road becomes lessened, his life reduced to a cautionary tale. Close your eyes and picture a different memory. Around a fire in a tavern, a man tells of a wandering fool who came through years ago. He sang songs so wild, so foolish, that the whole village laughed until dawn. He stumbled, he joked, he drank. He made everyone forget their burdens for a night. The teller smiles as he remembers. The crowd laughs, the memory softened by time. In this story, the wanderer is not villain, but entertainer, a figure of joy. His haze turned into gift. Folklore carried both sides. Some tales painted wanderers as cursed, doomed souls wandering the earth as punishment for sins. Others made them wise fools, touched by God, their madness hiding truths others could not see. Some were tricksters, clever in their drunkenness, outwitting lords and priests with words too sharp to ignore. Others were simply ghosts in memory, figures who passed quickly but left behind whispers, rumors, shadows that lingered long after their footsteps faded from the road. Imagine a ballad sung by a minstrel, his voice low, his lute soft. He tells of a man who wandered forever, his mug never empty, his eyes never clear. He speaks of how the man saw visions on the road, saints in the sky, demons in the fields, angels in the smoke of fires. The listeners shiver, unsure if it is truth or jest. To them, the wanderer becomes both holy and cursed, his haze a bridge to other worlds. The song carries his memory farther than his feet ever could, turning his life into legend, villages to remembered specific figures. A woman who begged at the church steps, always drunk, always singing. A man who stumbled through markets, cursing nobles and priests with equal fury. A fool who danced in taverns, his jokes remembered for years. These figures became part of the village's story, retold across generations, half real, half imagined. Their presence lingered, shaping how people thought of the poor, of the drunk, of the strange. And in some stories, the wanderer was envied, to live without ties, to drink freely, to wander endlessly. For those trapped in fields and toil, the idea carried strange allure. The haze that ruined some looked like freedom to others, a release from duty, from hunger, from endless labor. Few would admit it openly, but in whispered conversations, some wondered if perhaps the drunkard was freer than they were, if his haze, his wandering, his folly was not only weakness, but also escape. Breathe slowly, and let yourself drift into this space of memory. Fires burn low, voices whisper, songs echo faintly in the dark. The wanderer walks on, his body forgotten, but his image carried in story. To live on the road in the Middle Ages was to live twice, once in hunger and haze, once in rumor and legend. The medieval crackheads of the road may have been outcasts in life, but in memory they became warnings, entertainers, mysteries, their lives woven into the endless fabric of folklore, their haze lingering in stories long after their steps faded into dust. When we think of drunkenness in the Middle Ages, it is easy to picture peasants in taverns or beggars in the street. But excess was not limited to the poor. Behind castle walls, in great halls lit by torches and filled with music, the nobles themselves drank deeply, feasting for hours, their indulgence no less reckless than that of villagers. Wealth gave them more food, more wine, more luxury, but it did not save them from the haze. If anything, it made the haze heavier, richer, gilded in gold and velvet, yet no less foolish. Imagine the great hall of a castle on a feast night. The stone walls glow with torchlight. Tapestries flutter faintly in the heat. Long tables stretch the length of the room. Upon them are piled roasted meats, bread baked in golden crusts, fruits glistening with honey. Servants hurry with jugs of wine, pouring endlessly into goblets of silver and gold. At the high table, the Lord raises his cup, his voice loud, his smile wide. Around him, nobles laugh, toast, boast. The sound of music fills the air. The smell of food and wine thickens. The feast begins in splendor. Close your eyes and picture the goblets lifted again and again. Wine spills. Laughter rises. Voices grow louder. At first, the feast is orderly, the conversation polite, the boasting controlled. But as the night deepens, the haze thickens. Nobles lean too far. Their words slur. Their boasts grow wilder. One sings loudly, another stumbles, another falls asleep at the table, his head sinking into his plate. The servants move quickly, filling cups, clearing messes, keeping the feast alive as the hall itself sways with the rhythm of excess. The nobles drank not only wine but stronger brews, spiced concoctions brought from distant lands, meads rich and sweet, ales brewed in monasteries. Each cup was proof of wealth, each sip a reminder of power. To drink deeply was to show strength, to boast of endurance, to prove superiority over rivals. Feasts became competitions, each noble striving to outdrink the other, to boast the loudest, to laugh the hardest. But the competitions often ended in ruin, sickness, quarrels, even death at times. For all their wealth, the nobles were no less vulnerable to the haze. Imagine a quarrel breaking out at the high table. Two men argue over a boast, their voices sharp, their faces red. Servants rush to calm them, but their hands grip knives, their pride hotter than their reason. The hall falls silent for a moment, then erupts as others intervene. The quarrel may end in laughter, in a drunken embrace, or in blood spilled across the table. In such halls, joy and danger walked hand in hand, both fueled by the same endless flow of drink. The church criticized these feasts, calling them sinful, gluttonous, wasteful. Priests preached against the excess, reminding nobles of their duty to God, to their people, to humility. Yet even bishops and kings joined in such feasts, their own goblets as heavy as any lord's. The contradiction lingered, never resolved. Nobles gave alms in the morning and drank themselves senseless by night. They punished peasants for drunkenness even as they boasted of their own indulgence. The haze belonged to all, though the poor bore shame while the rich wrapped theirs in splendor. Imagine leaving such a feast at dawn. The hall is quiet now, the tables littered with bones, with spilled wine, with broken goblets. Servants move silently, cleaning, sweeping, carrying away those who still sleep on benches. The torches burn low, the air heavy with the smell of smoke and wine. Outside, the village stirs. Peasants rise for work. Children chase geese. The ordinary rhythm of life begins. But behind the castle walls, the nobles sleep in haze, their indulgence hidden until the next feast calls them to the table again. Breathe slowly and let yourself drift into this image. The stone hall glowing, the goblets shining, the laughter echoing, the haze thickening. The nobles of the Middle Ages were no different from the peasants in their weakness, only richer in their folly. They too drank. They too stumbled. They too became crackheads in their own way. Wrapped not in rags but in velvet, their haze gilded but no less heavy. Noble feasts in the Middle Ages were not only about food and drink. They were performances, spectacles, shows of wealth and power wrapped in music, dance, and theatre. The more extravagant the banquet, the greater the lord's reputation. But extravagance came with excess, and excess carried the same haze, whether in a smoky tavern or beneath a gilded ceiling. The goblets spilled as freely as the songs rose, and the haze deepened until the hall itself became a stage of folly. Imagine the great hall at its height. The long tables are crowded, the torches blaze, the musicians play, minstrels sing of battles won, of lovers betrayed, their voices rising above the noise of laughter. Jugglers toss knives that glint in the firelight. Fools dance in motley, their caps jingling with each clumsy step. Servants weave between the crowd, carrying platters of roasted boar, of pies stuffed with spices, of peacocks roasted whole, their feathers gilded for display. Each dish is marvel, each cup filled before it is empty. The feast, a parade of plenty. Close your eyes and picture the nobles themselves. At first, they sit upright, their manners sharp, their words measured. They applaud politely, they toast with dignity. But as the feast stretches on, their posture loosens, their words slur, their laughter grows loud. One noble rises to dance, stumbling through steps, his companions cheering. Another challenges a minstrel, insisting he can sing better, though his voice cracks and falters. Another demands more wine, pounding the table, his face flushed, his goblet spilling. What began as ceremony dissolves into chaos, the feast turning into haze. The entertainment fed the excess. Fools mocked the lords themselves, making jests that no sober court would allow. Minstrels sang bawdy songs, their words sharp, their rhymes shameless. Jugglers stumbled deliberately, drawing laughter from those too drunk to notice the trick. Even the servants became part of the performance, their frantic movements amusing those who called for more wine, more food, more spectacle. The hall became a stage, every corner alive with noise, with motion, with indulgence. Imagine the smell of the hall as the night wears on. The roasted meats are gone, leaving bones piled high. The spilled wine soaks into the rushes on the floor. the scent heavy and sweet. Smoke from torches mixes with sweat, with laughter, with cries. The air is thick, heavy, intoxicating even without the wine. A minstrel's lute grows faint, strings snapping one by one. The fool collapses in mock sleep, his act indistinguishable from the nobles themselves, who doze at the tables, their goblets still in hand. But indulgence could carry danger. Fights broke out here too, just as in taverns. Nobles argued over insults, over games, over boasts too large. Servants bore the brunt, struck or shouted at when wine ran dry, when platters did not arrive quickly enough. Sometimes the quarrels ended in laughter, in drunken embraces. Other times they ended in blood. The feast remembered not for joy, but for tragedy. The great halls were no safer than the smoky taverns. The difference was only in wealth, in splendor, in who carried the knives. The church criticized such feasts, warning that gluttony and drunkenness were sins of pride as much as weakness. But the warnings rarely stopped them. Nobles gave alms to the poor, funded churches, commissioned prayers, then returned to their halls, their goblets heavy, their voices loud. Hypocrisy was known, but it was tolerated, for wealth forgave much, and the haze behind castle walls was hidden more easily than the haze in village squares. Imagine the end of the banquet. The torches burn low. The music has stopped. The hall is scattered with nobles sleeping where they fell. Some lie across benches, others on the floor, their fine clothes stained with wine. Servants step quietly, clearing what they can, their eyes tired, their hands quick. The hall is silent now, except for snores, for the faint crackle of dying fires. The feast is over, the haze still thick, lingering in the breath of those who dream heavily on stone floors. Breathe slowly and let yourself sink into this image. The great hall, alive with song, with laughter, with indulgence, then fading into silence, into shadows, into sleep. The nobles of the Middle Ages were no different from peasants in taverns, their haze only dressed in gold and silk. They too stumbled, they too sang, they too became medieval crackheads, their folly gilded but no less heavy, their stories whispered with the same mix of laughter and scorn. The night of a feast might end in laughter, in song, in haze, but the morning after was quieter, heavier, slower. Even nobles could not escape the price of excess. Behind the stone walls of castles, as dawn crept in through narrow windows, groans replaced music, silence replaced cheer. The haze that felt warm in the night now pressed down like weight, turning joy into heaviness, leaving bodies sore, heads pounding, stomachs uneasy. The hangover was as much part of the feast as the feast itself. Imagine a nobleman waking in his chamber. His velvet cloak lies crumpled on the floor, his goblet overturned on the table. His head throbs with every heartbeat, his mouth dry, his eyes unwilling to open fully. He shifts slowly, each movement heavy, his body remembering every goblet of wine, every song shouted too loudly. Servants move quietly, bringing water, bread, broth. They bow low, but their eyes flicker with faint amusement, for they have seen this many times before. The Lord who roared in laughter the night before now moans softly, humbled by his own body. Close your eyes and picture the remedies. Some swore by strong broth made from meat and herbs, its warmth steadying the stomach. Others drank water mixed with vinegar, believing it would cut through the haze. Some turned to spiced wine, hotter and heavier, to push the sickness away with more of the very drink that caused it. Strange remedies appeared in manuscripts, powdered gemstones, crushed herbs, even roasted owl mixed with wine. Each promised relief, each offered little more than hope. The truth was simple. Time was the only cure. But hope was strong, and so the remedies were tried again and again. Imagine the castle courtyard on the morning after. Servants sweep scraps from the ground, clear bones from tables, pour away wine turned sour in cups. Dogs scavenge, children laugh at nobles who stumble still, their pride shaken. Some knights practice half-heartedly, their hands trembling on swords, their shields heavy in the sun. Others avoid the training yard entirely, their heads hidden in chambers, their shame as visible as their weakness. The feast is over, but its mark lingers, carved into bodies, remembered in groans. The morning after was not always quiet. Quarrels from the night before sometimes flared again. Regrets turned into grudges. Rivalries sharpened by haze carried forward into days and weeks. Feasts that began in joy could leave scars in memory. Arguments that lasted, enmities that grew. The haze faded, but the words spoken, the blows struck, the shame felt. These endured. A single night of excess could shape the politics of courts as much as battles or treaties, its weight heavier than wine itself. And yet, life went on. By noon, the nobles dressed again, their robes straightened, their jewels polished, their faces steady. They walked through halls as though nothing had happened, their pride stitched back together. Servants whispered, but only softly, for to speak too loudly was dangerous. The noble's weakness was known, but never named. The haze remained their secret, their shame, their habit hidden beneath the weight of power. Breathe slowly, and let yourself drift into this quiet aftermath. The torches burned low. The goblets lie empty. The hall smells faintly of smoke and sour wine. The nobles groan softly, their bodies heavy, their voices low. The feast is gone. The haze remains, its price paid in silence, in pain, in remedies that heal little. To be noble in the Middle Ages was not freedom from weakness, but only wealth in it, velvet and gold, wrapped around the same folly that touched peasants in taverns. The medieval crackheads wore crowns as easily as rags, their haze universal, their mournings after the same across stone walls and thatched roofs alike.